Good morning and welcome to the Landmarks Preservation Commission's public hearing and public meeting of Tuesday, September 17th, 2024. We'll begin by taking attendance, and I'll ask our General Counsel, Mark Silverman, to call the roll.
Chair Carroll,
Here.
Vice Chair Bland,
Here.
Commissioner Chapin,
Here.
Commissioner Chen,
Here.
Commissioner Chu,
Here.
Commissioner Ginsburg, Commissioner Goldblum is here, Commissioner Jefferson,
Here.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Here.
Commissioner Master.
Here.
All right, welcome again to the public hearing and public meeting of the Landmarks Preservation Commission today, September 17th, 2024. This meeting is being held in person in our hearing room at 1 Center Street on the 9th floor. It is also being held via Zoom for anyone who would like to participate remotely. And it is live streamed on our YouTube channel for anyone who would like to watch the proceedings. We're going to begin this morning with a few hearing items for applications for work on designated properties, and then we'll move to a public meeting item, which is an item that was read into the record on September 10th, 2024, and we'll be opening up the hearing for that item today. With that, I'll turn it over to our Director of Preservation, Corey Harala.
Thank you, Sarah, and good morning, everyone. We'll start today's Preservation Department agenda with public hearing item number 1, LPC 24-08211. This is an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of the Bronx, block 5819, lot 2115, 407 West 246th Street in the Fieldston Historic District. This is a Georgian revival style house designed by Dwight James Baum and built in 1917 to 18. The application is to construct a rooftop addition, modify an entrance vestibule and garage roof, and replace railings.
And I'll note for the record, Commissioner Goldblum is recused and not present for this item.
Okay. Good morning, Commissioners. John Field, Building Studio Architects. I'm the architect for this project, 407 West 246th Street. It is a Dwight James Baum dwelling. It is on the corner of Livingston Avenue and 246th Street in Fieldston. We're proposing work at the front on the handrails, above the sunroom porches, and at the rear, an attic extension on the main roof. This portion here is our attic extension. These denote our handrail locations where we're making improvements we'll talk about later. Again, existing from the street, existing handrails, a proposed handrail. We'll talk about that later. The attic extension is not visible from this angle. An aerial view shows the existing two-story non-historic addition that was done in the 50s in the rear. We are raising the roof here to the ridge line of the existing front for an attic extension. From the side, looking uphill, we do have dense vegetation. This is a spring shot showing existing. This is our proposed attic extension. We're continuing a slate roof up. We'll talk about this angle a little bit later, and a cornice above with white clapboard siding. This is the limited visibility. A mock-up prepared in winter with no foliage shows the addition looking uphill, and then this image zoomed in. This angled line here is the line of our new slate. The existing cornice and the existing gable end will remain. The upper portion of this addition is clapboard, again with a molded cornice, the detailing of which was developed from the sunroom porches. Another angle view, both in spring and with the mock-up again in winter, showing the visibility. The same view uphill with the rendering. At the rear of the house, not visible from the street, is our attic extension. This is set back about 6 feet from the existing gable end. The heavy cornice that's around the house remains. This facade aligns with the new clapboard piece above and a new cornice line. Again, rear view mock-up, rear view elevation. You can see the setback and the new piece of slate roofing that we're putting in to preserve the gable end of the gable end cornice. We're going to the ridge line as opposed to setting down, which is part of the master plan standards, because of the minimal headroom in the attic. There's only 7 feet at best. On the porches, our railing proposal is to raise the existing railings so they're a code compliant height with a design that is more in keeping with the original Baum design. This happens, and it's the same module that works all the way around the building. The original design was a lower height with a flat top rail. The existing railings that are in place had a modified proportion to the diamond infill and these sort of newel post creations that project above the top rail. We've developed this, the proportion in keeping with the original proportion and a double rail configuration where our top rail aligns with the top posts and we have a second rail with a steel mesh infill for code compliance. The other area of railing introduction will be across a non-historic extension to the garage. This roof is to be flattened and a new railing will be put in connecting kitchen entrance porch across to the level of the rear yard. There are 2 staircases flanking this garage. And the desire was to sort of connect this first floor plane all the way around the house. Note that the lattice work here on this porch and the design of the porch is historic. Here it is from the side, again, historic lattice. The non-historic roof of the garage. We're going to be using the same railing detail across. And we propose to maintain the historic lattice at the exterior by reconfiguring and reworking it over our screen door. It will be a lattice now over an outswing screen door, such that we maintain the exterior of the house as historic. Those are the component pieces. I'll conclude this and open to questions.
Thank you very much. Are there questions, commissioners? Yes, Vice Chair Bland.
Could you go back to the rear elevation?
Oops.
Right, on the lower right. It's most unusual, I think, to have an attic fenestration where the windows are so much taller in the attic than they are on the floor below. How does that happen and why does it happen?
We developed it that way just to bring in light. This is sort of the home office. Everybody's working from home and playroom area. Clients really wanted to bring light into what is a very solid home elsewhere. The sunroom porch was the inspiration for the attic piece.
So those windows would go down to the floor.
Those windows go down effectively to the floor. There's about 6 or 8 inches above.
Thank you.
And are they required? Is there an acquired light and air percentage that you need through them? Okay.
No, there's no, it's not for a percentage, it's a preference. But again, it was because of the sunroom environments, which are so pleasant at flanking the main house.
Right. And the new slate piece on the side, which slopes back from the gable or the eave line and that is just to transition between the dormer and the roof line?
So it's not only to transition, but also to minimize the effect of this mass on the roof from this gable end view. We really want to keep the gable visible because that's a historic piece of the house. And this cornice line was added later. But the slate is matching the slate of the front roof. It really looks like a roof and then sets back and sets off the clapboard piece.
Yes, go
I
ahead.
still have a follow-up, I guess. If you could go back to the one that's bugging me a bit, that elevation. And now my question, I should have asked it earlier. Is the head height of those top windows in the attic a given in order to achieve the height that you need in that attic to stand up? I was a little unclear on.
The head height at these windows is 6'8". We go from 6'8" to 7 feet at our ridge line. And
So you have 7 feet.
so we have 7 feet at the highest. I can go to the section.
Okay.
We have 7 feet at the highest. We really come down to 6'8" at the windows. The windows really do go floor to ceiling.
Yeah, okay, so right. And that's an almost flat, but not quite flat roof, I guess
Correct.
that you're right. Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Yes, Commissioner Jefferson?
My question have to do with the color. The roof is kind of gray, right? It's a gray color roof, the existing,
Yes.
and your roof is white. Why not? Were you thinking about it as a roof system, or you were thinking of it as a wall system? And if that's the case, then if it's a roof system, it would be gray, right?
Correct. The existing slate roof at the front of the house and the side of the house is gray slate. Our slate portion of the roof here where we're putting in, this is also gray slate. The only white that's going to be visible is the sidewall of this elevation and where the clapboard intersects the slate roof. This will be a rubber roof above. We made it white for reflectivity and just heat rejection, but it's not visible from.
All right, other questions? Let's move to public testimony. Is there anyone in the room who would like to speak on this item? Okay, noting that there isn't, I'll turn it over to Gregory to see if we have any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. I do not see any hand raised in our attendees list. If you'd like to speak on this item now, please click the raise hand button. Noting that there are no hands raised, I will state for the record that Bronx Community Board 8 recommends approval. And with that, I'll bring it back to you.
All right, thank you. All right, so if there are no other questions, I think we can move to our discussion. Is there anything you'd like to say before we do move to our discussion?
No, I think
Okay.
we've covered it in questions.
All right, great, thank you. All right, so Commissioner Chen, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Vice Chair Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed, and the proposal before us has sort of 3 areas of work. One is at the rear roof on top of a 1950s extension that elevates the roof line to create a habitable space in the attic, sort of treated as a porch-like dormer with clapboard on the side and slate roof to offset it on the adjacent to it. And then we also have the replacement of the porch rail which is a modern railing with a new railing that captures the proportions of the historic railings, but adds an upper bar and a lower bar to meet code and mesh behind the design to also meet code. And finally, the modification to the roof of the garage and the door to the porch, which will be added and the lattice replaced in front of it. Commissioner Chu, would you start this one?
Sure. So, the handrail improvements, the modification of the garage and the trellis, salvage and reworking, I think all look fine to me. What, I'm questioning right now is the mass of this addition on the roof. The things that I think I find troubling is just the scale of it. It is essentially a flat roof on a historic house that has pitched roofs, so it really alters the sense of it. I realize it's not that visible. I think in order to retain the initial design intent, I would suggest decreasing the footprint of the roof attic addition. I think that the alignment of the facade of the addition with the existing facade make it, I guess in some ways it counters the pitch roof above. And I feel like if you set it back, it would help set the addition in a sense of secondary priority to the existing house. I also might suggest reducing its or increasing its dimension to the right side of this roof plan so that the edge of the roof isn't reduced so narrow. I think the modification of the roof on the edge feels too complicated for a simple roof structure. And maybe if it were pushed to the left in this plan, it would give more of the existing roof there on the edge, and visibly be less seen from the streetscape. The other thing I would point out is Commissioner Bland's comment about the fenestration, to me, feel also overscaled for this facade in relation to the existing windows below. I think that the addition overall, if it wasn't as prominent as it is, I could find it acceptable. If it were smaller in scale, I realize the height is an issue. But if the footprint were smaller and the windows were more secondary and not so primary in size, it would feel more comfortable. Lastly, I just want to say I would want the applicant to look at the roofing. Slate roofs are made for pitched conditions, and a flat roof for slate shingles is risky. And it is essentially a flat roof here.
I think the flat roof is a rubber roof.
Oh, is it? I'm sorry. I thought it said, is that the existing drawing on the left? It says slate
So
roof?
the new slate is that.
Just the side, not the flat
side,
portion on
right,
top.
Not the front, so
Okay.
it's a rubber roof and clapboard sides.
Rubber roof on the flat. Okay.
Okay. Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I basically agree with Commissioner Chu. I don't have any problem with the changes to the garage or the lattice or the railing. But the way this, the addition has been designed, it almost looks like, you used the expression earlier, porch dormer. It looks sort of like a porch stuck on top of, and it seems to me rather distracting. And perhaps if the applicant would work with the staff and move it in the direction of really looking like a dormer more, both with the fenestration and it just doesn't seem well integrated. And it seems as a result too large and kind of not well integrated. So if it could be made, I think, to look more like a dormer, that might help. That's my suggestions.
Okay, thanks. Vice Chair Bland.
You might as.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jeannie.
In my new.
You see my name.
Yeah. Well, that's good.
Sorry about that.
So there are many aspects of this project that I think work. Starting, with the railings. Some of the changes are for code of compliance, which makes sense. And the changes are good because they also speak to the original design, with very thoughtful modifications. The work over the garage, I think is, in terms of railing and the changes made to the garage makes sense. I happen to agree that the rooftop addition, even though it won't be visible, is kind of awkward. I feel like the section on the left, I guess we're calling that sort of the splayed section, it disrupts the roof line in general, and it changes the whole, roof line of the house. And I feel like that part, it would be helpful if that part were not there. And then, if it was set back a little more, I think it would be good. So will not be overwhelming. Right now, it's overwhelming this part of the building in particular, but with that splay section, it kind of overwhelms more of the house. I also believe that the height of the windows is awkward, as has been said, and I don't know. Again, even though it's not visible, I feel like the color is not quite right. It should be a little more understated and blend more with what's, even if it's a gray, it would blend more, but white seems to make it pop out unnecessarily.
I think my concerns have been beautifully articulated already by three commissioners speaking before me, but I will say that I think this house is too important, too wonderful a little piece of architecture, domestic architecture, to have this awkward thing put on the roof. It's just wrong. It's too big. I'm glad that Jeannie pointed out the little section to the left of the two main windows. That's a piece of highly awkwardness. That I understand why it's making the attic more spacious. All of this, except for the edge profile on the right side, can't be seen from the public view. So I say these things with understanding that, but again, the house is just too nice a piece of architecture to let this happen to it. So I think we need to see another scheme that somehow addresses how you would manipulate that space to make it usable. I understand that's the desire, and I'm sure that's what we would like to accommodate, but for me, not yet.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of nice comments from the commissioners, and I think you did a great job with the handrail. I love the handrail. I love the trellis. I think given your client's need, and I agree with Vice Chair Bland that this is less visible, so we take it with that in consideration. But I think as Commissioner Chu mentioned about and also Vice Chair Bland about the oversize of the windows, basically floor to ceiling. There may be some way to maybe a tiny little sill on the floor, going up a little bit, give it a little window sill, or something. And yeah, the rest of the comments, I think that the other commissioners covered.
Oh, so let me start with what I think is really a good design. It's a handrail. I think the scale of it now really makes the second floor work really well. And I think at the garage level, it also ties these two elements together nicely, very well. I agree with the comments on the roof. And I struggled with that over the weekend because I thought, what if they aligned the windows vertically? Would that work? Maybe. And but the color was different. It became a mansard roof, really, kind of became a mansard roof by its definition. And I thought that could possibly work. And then the corner where they have the slate, you know, that could work too, but somehow it doesn't quite come together yet. And I think it's someplace in between. It's too big, it's too out of proportion, doesn't tie together. So I think we should just take a second look at it.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the comments that have come before me. It's a beautiful house. They've done a wonderful job with the addition of the railings. I think the modifications of the roof of the garage are fine. I think the issue is really the roof, the rear roof addition. The massing seems to be overwhelming for the building. So I agree that, you know, we have to take a look at it again.
So we're required a lot of support for the study. And I think that there's a sense that we can get to an occupiable space in addition at this factor. But that needs a little more work. That includes looking at reducing it from the setback, maybe resetting the color and the size of the fenestration. Hold that. So we'll do that when you're ready. Thank you. All right, thank you very much.
Right, we'll now move to public hearing item number 2, LPC 24-09981, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 587, lot 49, 51 Barrow Street in the Greenwich Village Historic District. This is a late federal style row house built in 1826, and the application is to construct rooftop and rear yard additions and replace the rear facade.
Hi, good morning, Commissioners. My name is Jackie Prudu-Vallon, JPD Preservation Consulting. Hold on. Okay, great. I'm here today with the architect, Peter Miller of Palette Architecture. This is 51 Barrow Street, an application to build a rear addition, including at the top floor, and to level the rear of the roof, build a rooftop bulkhead, and install mechanical equipment and railings at the roof. Sorry. There's also other staff level work pending at the front facade, including the usual restorative work. Incidentally, I just want to let you know that oops, did I go forward? The design for the rear was arrived at in consultation with LPC staff, but also in consultation with an organization that holds a facade easement on this building. This building is located on the south side of Barrow Street between 7th Avenue and Bedford. As you can see in the block plan, no portion of the rear of the house is visible from any public thoroughfare. Here's the house viewed looking east toward the other houses that were built as part of the same row between 1824 and 1826. When constructed, the houses from 51 to 41, 41 being the small one all the way to the left, they were all 2.5-story houses with pitched roofs on raised basements. In the late 19th century, 4 of the houses were expanded by creating a full floor at the top floor and rear additions being constructed, which we will show you later in this presentation. These changes resulted in the row losing its cohesive appearance and in particular its relationships, the houses' relationships to one another at the rear. Here are photos of the existing roof and rear facade. Please note the rear facade has already been highly altered by the removal of window openings, the installation of window openings in an irregular arrangement. The roof has been reframed within the last 40 to 50 years, and its pitch was changed at the rear, which we'll demonstrate later. An eave was added at the roof, and the rear facade has been clad in wood shingle, and the 2-story L has been finished in stucco. So in other words, most of this rear facade has already been highly altered. Here are additional photos of the existing rear. It's hard to get a full view of the rear in one photo because the rear yard is very, very small. It's only about 10 feet deep. Okay. One of the challenges of this project is that there's concern for the structure of the rear wall because it is not currently connected to the party wall on the right or east side of the house. And because of the misalignment of window openings, nearly a quarter of the live load of the house bears on a single point of the party wall and rear facade, neither of which would meet current structural standards for this type of load. Probes were done at the rear facade to determine its structure and condition. The rear facade is constructed of wood studs with fire brick infill, with wood shiplap siding that's been covered in wood shingles. There's no mortar left in the brick joints in this wall. Aside from the lot line walls, there's only one pier on the rear facade to bear the live load of the interior floors. The dimension of the pier is undersized and not properly braced to the lot line walls. For fire safety concerns and the appropriate distribution of loads, the engineer on this project actually recommends full reconstruction of this rear facade, whether or not a rear addition was to be proposed. Here is a framing plan for the proposed rear and the proposed roof deck framing plan. These axons show the proposed work. On the left is the existing view, and on the right, you can see the proposed changes at the roof and at the rear facade, and how the rear alteration will line up with the rears of the other houses that were part of the original row. The red dotted line indicates the line of the original footprints of the neighboring houses. As we will show in more detail further into this presentation, most of the other houses in this row have rear facades that have been extended, that in conjunction with their roofs being raised. Here are the existing and proposed roof plans. The existing roof is pitched. The proposal is to level the roof at the rear to be able to install a usable roof deck and to be accessed by a new stair bulkhead. On the left, you can see the rear extension in the plan, which would extend 4 foot 2 inches. Here are existing and proposed sections through the roof. On the bottom is the proposed section. The red dotted line overlaid on the bottom section indicates the existing building envelope. You can see how the roof is proposed to be leveled and the top floor rear facade extended by 30 inches. The proposed bulkhead will be a modest 7 feet tall with a slanted roof to prevent it from being visible from the street. Because of the location of the existing stair inside the house, the bulkhead would have to be constructed very close to the rear facade. And you can see the perimeter railing at 3 foot 6 inches and mechanical units that would be 4 foot 6 inches. Here's the existing building section and sightline study, where you can see the pitch of the roof at the rear is not typical of a federal house. Here's the proposed building section and sightline study with the existing building envelope overlaid in red. You can see that at the top floor, the leveling of the roof and pushing out of the top floor rear facade again by 30 inches. And you can see the proposed 3-story full width addition, which will project slightly less into the rear yard than the existing 2-story L. Here are photos of the mock-up installed on the roof looking east and looking west. Here are photos taken from Barrow Street with the mock-up in place. You can see that no portion of the work is visible. Here are additional mock-up visibility photos taken from 7th Avenue and from Commerce Street. Please note that the orange netting that you see in the photo on the left is a mock-up on top of 43 Barrow. So 51 Barrow cannot be seen at all from 7th Avenue. Here are existing and proposed rear elevations. On the left, you can see that this rear elevation has already had a history of alterations, including, as I said before, changes in window size and placement, the recladding and the shallow pitch of the roof, and the oddly overhanging eave. And on the right is the proposed rear elevation with the reconstructed top floor with a regular pattern of fenestration, which will be more in keeping with the punched openings that would have been there originally. And the 3-story full width addition would feature large glazed openings at the bottom 2 floors separated by a metal spandrel. Here's the proposed materials for the rear facade, including wood shiplap for the top floor, brick for the 3-story addition, and black painted steel railings and window frames at the lower floors. Here's the existing and proposed rear yard plans, the area in blue. On the right is the extent of excavation, which is minor. Here's the existing rear elevation in context with its immediate neighbors. And the proposed rear elevation in the same context. On these historic maps, we can see the evolution of the block. In 1854, in the top left, you can see that one house in the row, number 47, already had its rear extended. So bears to reason that it may have already had its roof raised by that time as well. In the 1895 Sanborn, on the bottom left, you can see that the additions at number 45, 43, and 41 have been built. On this block plan, you can see where there are existing rear additions. There are 3 4-story full-width additions noted in brown. However, the rear of number 47 should also be noted as a full-height rear addition. Sorry, you're going to see that as a consistent mistake through the presentation. Our apologies. Here for context, in plan is number 51 and the other houses in its row. That's how the row looked in 1854. Just a close-up. And on this proposed context plan, you can see the additions at the other houses in the row. Going left to right, in yellow is the 2-story addition at 41. In the middle are the 4-story additions at 43, 45, and 47. Again, the rear of 47 should also be shown as a 4-story addition. Sorry for that mistake. The proposed rear addition at 51 would extend the top floor out 2 foot 8 inches, which is shown in brown. And the 3-story addition would extend out another 4 foot 2 inches, so a total of 6 foot 10 inches. And the green indicates the backyard. Let me go back. By comparison, the addition at 47 Barrow extends 7 foot 10 inches, and the additions at 45, 43, and 41 extend 9 foot 9 inches. So our addition would be slightly more shallow, not as deep into the central green space as the others. Here are some aerial photos looking down into the block at the rears of 51 and the other houses in the row. And here you can see with photos and elevations, the rear facades of the other houses in 51's row. Please take special note of the rear of 41, which looks to be the last of the houses in this row with an unaltered roof at the rear, unaltered roof pitch, and unaltered top floor windows. For comparison, at number 51, all the way to the left, you can see that its roof slope has changed and the top floor ceiling height has already changed in comparison to 51. Here are the houses, here are the rears of the houses opposite 51 Barrow, the houses facing onto Commerce Street. Again, on both sides of the street, many alterations to the rears of all of these houses. And here's just a study comparing 51 and 41 Barrow, the 2 houses that still have pitched roofs. You can see that 41 retains what was likely its original window height at the top floor and its original roof pitch a little more clearly. So here's some additional photos looking down into the block. More photos. This is looking directly across from 51 Barrow. Existing and proposed building sections. Rear wall details. Window details for the large glazed opening for the openings for the bottom 2 floors of the proposed addition. Window details for the upper floor windows, the punched openings. This is just a close-up of the proposed new rear facade with the wood cladding maintained to keep somewhat of a relationship with what the original cladding material was on the back of this building. This is a rendering of the proposed rear. And just a short reminder, the commission has approved other similar types of rear additions where there's a mix of modern and traditional within a rear addition. So this is 75 and 77 Jane, 11 Commerce, which 11 Commerce incidentally also included an approval for a bulkhead very close to the rear facade. 9 St. Luke's Place and 123 Washington, similarly scaled rear addition with a hierarchy of fenestration similar to what we're proposing here. To conclude, we think that the alterations we're proposing here are in keeping with the with previous approvals by this commission and with the appearance of other additions within this block. And we look forward to your questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Do we have any questions? Commissioner Chu?
Yes, so in the structural, you're talking about the structure of the rear facade.
Mhm.
Is the existing house, does the structure change directions in the second half of the house? Or is that just a proposed revision
know,
to the structure?
No, come up here. I'm going to have the architect answer that. Just say your name into the.
Peter Miller from Palette Architecture. The structure does change directions at the roof. The joists span the short length of the lot for all the floors, but at the roof, it spans from the ridge towards the back wall. So the roof is carried by the rear facade.
And in the proposed restructuring of it, does that remain that way, or is the
Yeah.
floors below also being redone and changed
No,
direction? Okay.
the structure from the main back wall towards the front is going to remain largely as is. The roof joist will be supported by a new frame structure at the rear facade. So the one that spans towards the rear facade will be supported by a steel frame structure.
Okay, so the existing condition of the rear is that it does take the load of the roof.
That's right.
only, which is a bit uncommon. I mean, I guess sometimes they go side to side, and so the rear is usually just a self-supporting facade. But in this case, the existing condition is such that it's in bad shape and needs to be rebuilt completely.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Correct.
All right. Other questions? All right. Not seeing any questions. I'll see if there's anyone to speak on this item, and noting that there isn't, I will turn it over to Gregory Kala to see if we have remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We have a couple of hands raised in our attendees list. The first we'll be hearing from is Christina Conroy from Victorian Society of New York. Christina Conroy, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Christina Conroy for the Victorian Society, New York. Now, the Victorian Society supports most of the changes the applicant is proposing for this very early, very small row house. Because the building is set between two taller structures, it seems that the proposed rooftop addition, essentially a stair bulkhead and mechanical equipment, will not be seen from any public way. The rear cornice on the wood-clad rear facade appears to have been boxed out in previous alteration, so raising the rear facade will not destroy any significant architectural features. Given the amount of deterioration visible in the photographs the applicant has provided, the reconstruction of the previous altered rear facade seems appropriate. However, we do not support the formal symmetrical design of the rear facade. Commissioners, the Greenwich Village designation report states that 51 Barrow Street is part of a row of speculative houses built between 1826 and 1828. It describes them as, quote, 7 attractive, though modest houses of the late federal period, unquote. It goes on to say that the original tenants included 2 carpenters, a mason, and a stonecutter, quote, all of whom may have played a part in the construction of these houses, unquote. These were workmen's cottages. The rear facade of many of the neighboring houses have an informal quality and retain smaller punched window openings. We believe that the generic formal design proposed for 51 as presented is not in keeping with the overall character of this block, nor does it reflect the very early period of this house. We urge review of the proposed floor plans to find ways to break down this formal symmetry. We also do not support the use of brick cladding on this facade. The original construction was timber framing with brick infill, faced with wood clapboards, and later wood shingles. This is a significant feature denoting the early date and modest character of the house. A new rear facade should reflect this history in its design and materials. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we'll be hearing from Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. Lucy Levine, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. And once you are a panelist, please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. HDC is generally supportive of the proposed massing of this rear addition. However, we find the proposed use of brick to be materially inappropriate and feel that the applicant should explore the use of clapboard. Additionally, we believe this rear lacks a compositional consistency between the fenestration types and the proportions of their openings. We ask that LPC staff work with the applicant to refine the project's rear facade. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I do not see any attendees with their hands raised, so I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 2 recommends approval of the window repair, the rear extension, the non-visible rooftop terrace and mechanical equipment, and that the applicant give evidence to the commission that proper engineering studies have been undertaken with respect to the excavation and that required notification to owners of adjacent properties has been given, and that a plan of demolition and construction that ensures the integrity of the subject property and adjoining properties is being followed. We also received a letter from Village Preservation, which was shared with the commissioners beforehand. And with that, I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
All right, thank you. Would you like to respond to the comments we've heard?
Yeah, we're Jackie Puduvalin again. We're going to each take a turn. I would be curious to know what Village Preservation's letter says because I've not been made aware of that. But in terms of fenestration pattern, the intention was to propose something that has been approved by this commission many times on similarly scaled houses within this district. A design that maintains a hierarchy of fenestration, returns a regular pattern of fenestration to the back. In terms of the brick material, that was partially in consultation, a determination partially in consultation with the holder of the conservation easement on the house. But I can only say that I'm sure commissioners are aware, there's been many, many times when this commission has approved a brick rear addition. All right, and I'm going to turn it over to the architect again.
Yeah, and I think just to quickly note, I think the Village Preservation letter was concerned about some of the structural issues. So.
Okay. Peter Miller once again. I just wanted to speak briefly about the window fenestration pattern. So the selection of the double hung windows at the second and third floor were made to match the pattern of other houses on the block, as well as the front of the building in terms of spacing, scale, and proportion. The larger fenestration, the lower portion of the building is, as Jackie mentioned, consistent with other approvals. And there was special care given to match the proportions of the double hung windows in terms of the button arrangement and proportions.
Okay. All right, commissioners, any other questions? Okay. All right. Commissioner Goldblum, would you make a motion to close the hearing? Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Hearing's closed and we'll begin our discussion. And as has been presented, this is a building in a row of other early houses, the majority of which have already had full height rear yard extensions that raise the roof as well as went deeper into the rear yard. This is a proposal to reconstruct the altered rear facade, which has already been raised in height, to modify that height slightly add a bulkhead and mechanical equipment on top. And then at the rear facade to bump out 2 feet, 8 inches at the top floor, and I think another 4 feet maybe at the other floors, and clad the top floor in wood and the lower floors in brick. This is still, the depth of this will be both the top floor and the lower floors will be less than the other rear yard additions within this block. It is next to a large apartment building and it is not visible from a public way, either the rear facade or the roof. And it's a very, very tight block, if you notice from the aerial photos. So I'm not sure there's not a huge context of green space in row houses. So that also can be considered in our discussion. So we'll begin that now. Commissioner Chapin, would you start this one?
Yeah, sure. First, I think that the presentation was, was very thorough and, clear. So I actually find this very much in line with previous approvals that we have done. I think it's well designed. It doesn't extend beyond the existing other extensions in the row. And there have been substantial changes both to the rears and the roofs of most of these houses. And furthermore, it's next to a very large building, this particular property. So I agree pretty much with the some of the testimony, but I think that the charm of the asymmetrical fenestration, which is sort of interesting, that also has really been lost here. And I just feel that this is, as I said, very typical of previous approvals, and I think it's fine.
Okay. Vice Chair Bland?
I think the fact that this looks so familiar is that we've seen this scheme time and time again, actually. So therefore, it clearly is consistent with what this commission has approved many, many, many times over. The fact that this rear elevation has been changed and altered many times over history in many ways that I think we would not think is appropriate, now is returning to something that I think is much more typical, seen in the rear of these houses. I think I'm searching, I'm finding nothing to complain about at all. So I think it's perfectly in line with what is appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Well, Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I think you said it all. I think this is a modest slate enlargement, and actually still after the enlargement is still less than the neighbors. It's very, very modest, and in the context of next door apartment building, the lack of visibility and is as Vice Chair said, this has become quite familiar.
Okay. Commissioner Goldblum.
I think I generally agree. I think that their presentation was clear and made the case well. Modifying the roof of a house of this vintage is generally kind of a red line for me, but I think that the fact that they demonstrated that the roof at the back half was already modified was enough for me to find that appropriate, modify it again. I think that the general reorganization of the rear facade and the extension volume is appropriate. It is following the LPC playbook, like Fred said, and in that it is appropriate. The only thing that gave me a little bit of pause was the comments by some of the people who testified about the use of brick, but I think that the probes showed that this may not have been a wood rear facade in the first place, and that the cladding certainly is not in and of itself original. So I can't accept the way they've done it. I think it might be might have been interesting for them to have done it in wood, but I don't think it's our place to require it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
I think it's appropriate. I think it's a handsome little building. It's nice.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Master.
Yeah, it's a very modest proposal in terms of the rooftop addition and then the rear yard extension. Very familiar to us. So I have to say, absolutely, it's appropriate.
All right, Commissioner Chu.
I think my fellow commissioners have said everything I would comment on. I think it's appropriate.
All right, and Commissioner Lutfi.
I happen to agree. I would like to just emphasize again that what you said in the beginning, Sarah, and the applicants showed to us and presented to us, this facade is structurally unsound and it needed to be recreated in some way. And I do think, I don't really want to use the word modest because the window openings are not at the, first two levels are not necessarily modest, but they are consistent with what we will accept. But overall, the way the whole rear facade has been put together is very thoughtful and well done. And I appreciate the fact that there's, some wood shingles in there in addition to the brick, and that it does fit well within the context around it, and that they didn't project out more than anyone else. So thank you. I can approve this.
Okay, all right. So I think we're all in agreement. Commissioner Chapin, would you make the motion?
Sure. In the matter of a certificate of appropriateness, Borough of Manhattan, LPC 24-09981, 51 Barrow Street, Greenwich Village Historic District. A late federal style row house built in 1826. Application is to construct rooftop and rear yard additions and replace the rear facade. I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Greenwich Village Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed work will not damage or eliminate any significant architectural features, that the proposed work will not be visible from any public thoroughfare, that the existing rear facade has been highly altered, including shingle recladding, alterations to openings at the top floor and elsewhere, and the extension of roof eaves and possible raising of the top floor. Therefore, its reconstruction to better recall a typical historic condition is warranted. That the reconstructed top floor will feature painted wood siding, multi-light double hung windows and door, and a profile cornice that will recall a typical historic condition for buildings of this age, style, and construction type. That the rear facades of the neighboring row houses feature a variety of additions, fenestration patterns, and changing planes. And therefore, the proposed work at the rear of the building, including reconstructing the top floor at a deeper plane and constructing a new rear yard addition below, will not affect a unified row or diminish the central green space. That the design and materiality of the proposed rear yard addition, featuring brick cladding, steel casement windows, and door assemblies, and punched openings and rear and metal railings, will be in keeping with the scale and character of rear facades and additions within the block. That the proposed rooftop bulkhead, railing, and mechanical units will not be visible from public thoroughfares and will be set back from the front and rear facades except for a portion of the stair bulkhead, thereby retaining a sense of the building's original form and massing. And that the proposed excavation at the rear yard will be done in compliance with the Department of Buildings regulations under the supervision of a licensed professional engineer to protect the building and adjacent buildings.
Thank you. And Vice Chair Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland, Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi, Commissioner Master.
Aye.
With 9 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
That's approved. Thank you. And we'll move to the next item.
Next item is public hearing item number 3, LPC 25-00284, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 848, lot 61, 900 Broadway in the Ladies Mile Historic District. This is a commercial building designed by McKim, Mead and White, built in 1886 and altered in 1905 by Maneke and Frank. And the application is to install awnings and signage and to modify a ramp.
Hi again, Commissioners. Jackie Puduvalin, JPD Preservation Consulting. I'm here today with the architect who should be on via Zoom. His name is Anton Christel of Christel Studios. This is 900 Broadway, a commercial building in the Ladies Mile Historic District, designed by McKim, Mead and White, built in 1886 to 87, and later altered by Maneke and Frank in 1905. The proposal you're seeing today is for exterior alterations at the corner ground floor storefront, including the installation of awnings with closed sides, security cameras attached to transom bars at some storefront locations, the removal of an existing concrete access ramp, and its replacement with a new access ramp with railings, internally illuminated sign boxes on the columns flanking the main entrance on the corner, and an internally illuminated blade sign on the Broadway facade, and also replacing doors that would be in non-compliance with an existing master plan on the building. We hope to demonstrate in this presentation that this work is in keeping with installations that were present historically within this district and with the commercial of Ladies Mile, the commercial character of Ladies Mile overall. Here's the location of the building highlighted on the district map and on the block plan. The building stands on the southeast corner of Broadway and East 20th Street. From very early on, this building has seen alterations to its storefronts. On the left is the building as it was first constructed in 1886. In the middle is the following year, 1887, where you can see awnings with closed sides have already been installed at the 2 southern bays on Broadway. And in the photo on the right, you can see the result of the 1905 alteration, which was additional floors and projecting storefront enclosures at the corner and at 2 bays on either side of it. Here are close-up photos of the storefront bays in 1913. Again, you can see awnings at the upper floors that were canopies with closed sides. Here's the building in 1986. When the district was designated, you can see the subject bays were enclosed with new infill at the corner and with concrete block at the flanking bays. Here are the storefronts as they appear today. In 2003, LPC approved a master plan for storefronts, which brought them back much to their original appearance. Here are the existing and proposed East 20th Street elevations. On the right, you can see the proposed awnings and the new ramp with railings at the corner. Here are the existing and proposed elevations at the corner. On the right, you can see the proposed ramp and railings, the proposed menu boxes on the columns, the proposed blade sign, and the awnings. The doors at the corner will also be replaced, again, in non-compliance with a master plan, but also incidentally meeting LPC rules. And here are the existing and proposed Broadway elevations. Again, on the right, you can see the ramp, the railings, the proposed menu boxes on the columns, the proposed blade sign, and the awnings with closed sides. Here you can see the proposed features and plan. The area of pink indicates the new ramp with its railings. Here's a close-up photo of the entrance. In the photo on the left, you can see the columns where we're proposing to install the menu boxes. Those columns still have holes on them from a previous installation, which you could see in the historic photo. I think we'll be showing that later in this presentation again. Let's see. The door replacement details are also here. They'll be just painted wood doors with glazed panels. Here are the details for the ramp and railings. The new ramp will be concrete finished with marble tesserae for a very traditional design. Here's the existing condition of the corner entrance on the left, and on the right is the rendering of the proposed condition, including the awnings, which would have closed sides and striped canvas fabric. The marble tiled ramp with metal railings, ADA compliant incidentally, and an area of new or revealed diamond plate where there's currently a concrete slope to the left, and the signs installed on the columns. Incidentally, from our research, from the historic photos I showed earlier in the presentation, there were never any vault lights here. There were some openings for some below grade window openings to receive light. So I think when they close those, they just put diamond plate down at some point because the sidewalk is it's stone flags. So putting down diamond plate was an easier solution to close up the rest of the sidewalk. Here are details for the awnings and proposed cameras, which will be attached to infill under the awnings. Again, non-historic infill, and they will be obscured from view by the awnings. Again, the awnings are proposed to have closed sides, and the awning over the door would also have lettering on its skirt with the name of the restaurant. Here are additional awning details showing how they'll be framed. Please note there are existing holes in the masonry that will be used to anchor those awnings. It's less common today, but a century ago, awnings with closed sides were very common, especially on commercial buildings, and especially in this district. Here is a photo looking north on Fifth Avenue from 22nd Street in 1900, where you can see a proliferation of awnings with closed sides. For additional context, these are photos of buildings that were in the Ladies Mile Historic District at the turn of the 20th century. On the left is Fifth Avenue and West 21st Street. In the middle is the northwest corner of Fifth and West 18th Street. And on the right is Broadway at 21st Street. Here are details for the proposed menu boxes on the columns. As you can see in the historic photo from 1886 in that upper corner, there were sign boxes here when the building was first constructed. The holes in the masonry can still be seen from when these signs were installed. These same holes will be used again to attach the new menu boxes, which will be convex displays like the original design, the original signs, and will have a dark bronze painted finish. The proposed illuminated blade sign will likewise use existing holes in the masonry for attachment. Here are detailed drawings for the proposed sign, which would be 10 feet above the sidewalk as required by zoning. The sign itself would be almost 24 inches long and almost 12 inches tall and would project off the building approximately 30 inches. The sign would be lit so that the illumination would only shine within the sign itself and onto the surface of the sign using LEDs. There's historic precedent within this district for illuminated blade signs, as shown in these photos from the early 20th century. On the left is the corner of Broadway at West 20th Street in 1918, where you can see blade signs, including one that looks to have neon letters. And on the right is the east side of Broadway at East 17th Street, in which you can see another projecting neon sign. To conclude, we think the proposed changes are in keeping with the history of alterations on this building and with the history of awning and signage installation within this district. Thank you. We look forward to your questions and comments.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Yes, Vice Chair Bland.
Apart from the photographs of the historical enclosed awnings, is there any other reason that you want or need enclosures as opposed to just the straight awning without the enclosed sides?
Let's see, if the architect is here by Zoom, he might want to answer that, but I can tell you his answer to that previously in the community board meeting was really just for aesthetic purposes. They're trying to evoke a more historic look for the restaurant overall. They want that traditional look to awnings. So for that, that's why he's referencing oops, I'm on the wrong slide. Referencing
Yes, I'm
awnings
here.
with closed sides. Oh, here he is. Okay. Introduce
Oh.
yourself.
Yes, I'm Anton Christel from Christel Studio. Good morning, everyone. No, it's purely of a historical aspect. I mean, that sort of corner building, for all photographs and things we've seen, it's either, do something extremely discreet that gets lost, or make the building live with something appropriately historic and maybe less seen contemporarily.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Yes, Commissioner Jefferson.
I have a question about the ramp. Is it 1 in 12 or 1 in 20? The slope.
The slope is exactly, I think, 7.5%. But let's say it needs to be, yeah, an 8% slope is the maximum for ADA.
My concern was the podium itself. It's higher than a step, right? It's more than a step, right? It's
the rise.
Right. Don't you need an edge there so wheelchair don't fall over, or am I off base?
No, it's definitely ADA compliant. It has to be the maximum of an 8% slope. We're slightly below that. And the two railings, it's obligatory to have a double railing if the rise is above 6 inches. So we have approximately 6.5 inches from a step. So it's higher than a regular step, but it is compliant. Doesn't need any other edges or steps to be compliant.
So only the upper portion is up to 6 inches or 6.5 inches. So the lower portion isn't that high off the ground. So therefore the railing doesn't need to go all the way down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If I can add, the lower portion is actually flush with the sidewalk.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. It is. Maybe in this rendering, it's not very clear, but there's no indentations or lips. It's totally flush, what is outside of the railings on the sidewalk.
Okay. Other questions? And then just a follow-up on the awning. Does the frame end right above the skirt, and is the skirt unframed?
Yes, the frame is only above the skirt. The skirt
Okay.
is soft and free.
Okay, great. On the, yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. All right. Is there anyone in the room would like to speak on this item? Noting that there isn't, I will turn it over to Gregory Kala to see if we have any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. If you would like to speak on this item, please click the raise hand button now and I will call on you. Okay. We have one person with their hand raised, that being Christina Conroy from the Victorian Society in New York. Christina Conroy, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. And please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Christina Conroy for the Victorian Society, New York. Now, the Victorian Society supports most of the changes which the applicant is proposing. The entrance ramp might be too decorative, too apt to draw attention to itself if installed outside a more austere building. However, the elaborate detailing original to 900 Broadway is in no danger of being upstaged by this small ramp. In addition, it seems it would be completely reversible. The curved signs, which are secured to the pillars flanking the main entrance, appear to match the size and location of historic signs seen in the 1886 photograph. The existing double doors at the corner entrance are modern. Replacing them will not destroy any historic fabric. The double doors to be installed at this entrance are simple and straightforward and will not compete with the historic features of the facade. The projecting blade sign is modestly scaled and is to be installed into the granite cladding using existing penetration points. The power supply to the sign will be by low voltage cable installed within the grout lines, an unobtrusive and non-destructive method which we'd like to see used more often. The security cameras are to be secured to the modern window frames. The striped fabric the applicant would use to clad the proposed awnings is appropriate. Striped awnings were popular in the 19th century, and a few can be seen in the historic photographs the applicant has provided. However, the awning frames are too rigid and boxy. They give the awnings the appearance of being made of painted plywood and not cloth. For many years, the commission required fixed awnings to have open sides and flexible skirts, which looked similar to the rectangular awnings seen on those 19th century photos. We urge their use in this case. Thank you, commissioners.
Okay. Thank you so much for your testimony. I do not see any additional hands raised, so I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 5 recommends approval. And with that, I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, so I think it's all supportive testimony. There was a question again about the awning, and if you want to just address that, I think, again, having the skirt be loose is a way that we've been able to evoke the historic awnings in other cases where we've had sides.
Thank you. Jackie Pudevallen again. Yes, regarding the awning, the structure of the awning, the frame has been designed to be accommodative to existing holes in the masonry. So that and the overall shape just being aesthetically pleasing, that's the impetus for the shape of these awnings. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, any final questions? All right, then let's move to close our hearing. Commissioner Lutfi, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Chu, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so we're looking at this proposal. There are several components. There are the awnings, the installation of signs on the columns using existing holes in a place where there were historically signs, the replacement of the doors, installation of a small illuminated blade sign, and then the reconfiguring of the ramp to sort of clean it up. So cutting off the edge to the left and revealing and or restoring the curb line there, the baseline there, and then the diamond plate, and doing this code compliant ramp that has 6 sides and the address built into it. So we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Goldblum, would you start this one?
Sure. I think this is totally appropriate. I think that it's very charming, and they've, it's like kind of in the Balthazar mode of this
Not the same.
retro Euro vibe, but it's a totally appropriate building to do that kind of thing on, and I think that they've got a very sensitive hand in doing the details. I wish the ramp didn't need the railing, but I think that given that it does, I think that the accommodation is minimal and appropriate. I agree that the little border business on the ramp is a bit fussy, but that's kind of in keeping with that kind of place. And it's not, I don't think it's too much. I think it's fine.
Okay, Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I agree with Michael. I think it's necessary. I think what stood out was the light color on the front of that, but I think in view of the ADA access, you need to highlight that, not be a dark color. I think the handrail is minimal. It reminds us of a different era on Broadway.
Okay, Vice Chair Bland.
Yeah, altogether a nice nice presentation and a nice design. I think I still go back to my question and my hesitancy on the side enclosures of the awnings, and my reasons also are completely aesthetic only. my eyes tell me that this McKim and White building is a hugely solid piece of architecture with these massive stone piers that are highlighted by these extraordinary horizontally banded columns at the edge. This is massive male dominant architecture if you've ever seen it. And for my eye, even though yes, we saw boodles of enclosures of those historic awnings in this very area, my eye still tells me that a more elegant solution would be not to have the side enclosures, but to have a counterpart to this massive architecture with very simple, straightforward awnings without the side enclosures, rather like they do in Italy. And then I quickly Googled where our architect was speaking from, and I think I understood that he might be speaking from Rome. So I'm laughing at myself in a way right now, if that's true. And anyway, this is hardly an issue that's going to keep me from voting for the project, but I just still add that I'm feeling kind of strongly that it shouldn't have there, but I may be alone.
Okay. Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, I again, excellent presentation. I basically feel that, because of the historic presence of the awnings, that they are appropriate in this case. And also, I mean, back in the 1800s or early 1900s, they were there. So I also think that the door replacement, I guess, I'm not even sure if that's before us because it's according to master plan, is fine. The ramp material and the railings are appropriate. The blade sign, the lighted blade sign, I think is fine. It's not attached in a place that's a problem. So I basically can support all of this.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lutfi.
I think the applicant has done a very good job overall, and I commend them for looking to use existing holes in the columns and other things like that to not in any way impose any more incursions into this building. I think that's done incredibly well. The signage is terrific. The security cameras are really couldn't be more understated. And overall, I have to say, it's very handsome and I can approve it. That said, I would also like to make a couple of awning suggestions. The first is that even though in the district there, we have seen historically that there are striped awnings, I feel that at the base of this building, there is a lot going on from a design standpoint. And my feeling is that the stripes compete with that architectural design, and not only in the columns, but also in the window arches and other places. So I personally think it would be lovely if this could be a single color so that it will be present, but it recedes. I also think it would be nice. I think it's important for the applicant to work with staff a little bit on the awning because it does seem a little too structured to me. And I feel like if there are going to be signs, they need to be loose, or I also think Fred's suggestion is a good one.
Yeah. And as I said, when in the past, when we've approved awnings with sides, we've had done it with loose skirts and on the sides as well. And the applicant has represented that that's the case here. All right, Commissioner Chu.
Yeah, I think that the applicant has taken an approach that's very sensitive to the historic building fabric and supported all the proposed elements with precedence. I think this is appropriate in terms of the awning. I think I can approve what's being proposed. I do share some of Fred's feeling there about the awning not feeling a rigid piece of architecture, but a loose element within a very formal, heavy arch. And I think I agree with him, but I find that because of the scale of these arches, I keep looking back at the elevations of the two streets, and not just the corner elements, because they're significantly smaller, that I think they could support the ends because they're so wide and large.
Okay. Commissioner Master?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the comments that my fellow commissioners have made. I think that a lot of the elements here that they proposed, they have shown have historic precedence, not only in the neighborhood, but on this building. I like the ramp. I think it's a big improvement from what was there before. And of course, it's important to be ADA compliant. The handrails are simple. I think that the door replacement is appropriate. And I like the menu boxes that they've introduced, and I'm glad that they went back and, found that they had them originally, are using the same holes. I think the blade sign is also appropriate, and I'm fine with the awnings.
Okay. And Commissioner Jefferson?
An impressive, carefully designed of elements, ramps. And it fits in with the picturesque base of this building. The issue for me is just the awning, and it could be subordinate to the building itself, or it could be the way it is now, which has its own personality. So the personality is fine. I think this is fine.
Okay. All right. So I think we have enough to approve it as is. Commissioner Goldblum, would you make the motion?
Sure. Should I add suggestions or no?
Nope, it's as is.
As
We have
is.
the votes.
Very good. Regarding 900 Broadway in the Ladies Mile Historic District, the application is to install signage, awnings, and modify a ramp. I note that the building's scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Ladies Mile Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed work will not damage or eliminate any significant architectural features, that the proposed fixed awnings with closed sides will recall the historic awnings at this and other buildings in the historic district, that the redesign of the existing utilitarian ramp will better relate to the historic corner entrance and expose more of the column base, and the recladding with a stone mosaic will introduce a modest design feature that is compatible with materials of the building and in keeping with mosaic floors sometimes found at historic entrances. That the new handrails will be simple in design and will not call attention to themselves. The proposed single light wood double door will recall historic doors found at entrances and storefronts of buildings of a similar size and style at the historic district. That the proposed simple curved menu boxes will utilize existing holes on the columns from prior signs which were historically present at these locations, and that their location between decorative stone courses will minimize their visual impact on the columns. That the proposed illuminated blade sign is of modest scale and will have a discrete presence on this highly ornate building, and will attach to plain masonry at mortar joints, and that the work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the Ladies Mile Historic District.
All right. And Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right, John, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Vice Chair Bland.
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Chu.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi. Commissioner Master.
Aye.
9 in favor, 9 opposed. The motion passes.
Okay. Thank you. That's approved. And to the extent that the applicant or that you would like to think about opening up the awnings or doing a solid color, those changes would be eligible for a staff level reviews anyway. So you could continue to work with Roberto on that if that's where you wish to go. All right, we'll move to the next item.
All right, this is the next and final item. We'll move to the public meeting agenda to pick up public meeting item number 1, LPC 24-09829, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1199, Lot 39, 8 West 86th Street in the Upper West Side Central Park West Historic District. This is a Georgian revival style row house designed by Taylor and Levy and built in 1908. The application is to construct rear yard and rooftop additions and alter the main entrance and areaway. This was read into the record last week at the public hearing of September 10th, 2024. However, the application was not presented and no public testimony was taken at that time. So we'll be seeing it for the first time today after we open the hearing.
Okay, so we'll, Commissioner Master, would you make a motion to open the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the hearing is open.
Now? Oh, okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Susan Weber, the founder and director of the Bard Graduate Center. I founded BGC more than 33 years ago to strengthen the fields of decorative arts, design history, and material culture. Naturally, I chose a historic townhouse at 18 West 86th Street as its home.
All right, we'll ask you to just step back a little bit. Sometimes if you're too close to the mic, we get a little feedback or static.
Okay.
But we don't want you too far back. People who are watching remotely will only hear if you're at
Okay,
the
that's-
microphone. So
Okay.
we'll try to
So-
find that balance. And I'll ask
Okay.
that the audience please be respectful and not speak out during the proceedings. Okay,
As
go ahead.
BGC has grown, I have renovated 2 additional townhouses on the same block. Now hundreds of our alumni work as scholars and curators in these fields, and I am proud that many work specifically in historic preservation. So the preservation of historic structures, their design and architectural details is extraordinarily important to me. I have carefully and lovingly restored, renovated, and expanded all 3 of the townhouses now under BGC's care. In each case, I have worked with the architect, Susie Rodriguez. Oh, okay. Okay. I think this one is better. Okay. In each case, I have worked with the architect, Susie Rodriguez, to preserve and celebrate these historic buildings that make our neighborhood better and the block more beautiful. In part, to honor my work on these buildings, I was proud to receive the New York Landmarks Conservancy's Living Landmarks Award in 2015. Unfortunately, under its prior ownership, 8 West 86th Street has fallen into disrepair. We have the opportunity to create a valuable educational center that will serve our existing students, house our study collections, and ensure the building's future. With your approval, Susie Rodriguez and I will restore, renovate, and expand it with the same careful attention to historic detail we have shown in the other buildings on the block. So thank you for your consideration of this project. I will turn it over to Susie and to Ward to go through our proposal in detail. Thank you.
Good morning. Is that clear? I'm Susan Rodriguez, the architect for the Bard Graduate Center's new project at 8 West 86th Street. Just press the button. Okay. There we go. To put the project in context, it's on the south side of the block, right close to Central Park West. You can see it indicated there in red. In the context of the other projects that Susan just mentioned, and it's in the Central Park West Historic District. We'll go into its sort of history, and Ward will assist in that regard. Just to build a little bit more on what Bard does, I think it's important because this is a project that's extending kind of the resources that'll be available to the students. It's, as Susan mentioned, it's founding in '93, but it's not only going to be about PhD programs and the exhibitions that are housed in the other buildings, and the public programs, but this will expand to build upon the idea of object-based learning. And it's all about a collection that they've had that's been growing over the years, as you can see in some of those, that's done in a very modest way, but it's really the opportunity to expand that. And many of you know Byron and Susan Bell, and they've been amassing an amazing collection for the last 50 years in their townhouse, both on 15th Street, 11-foot wide townhouse. It's quite amazing. And then up in Woodstock, New York, and they have been given the collection to the Bard Graduate Center. So the combination of the collection that BGC already has, which is indicated here, more than 3,000 objects, and the Bell collection is the purpose for this building. So it's really exciting. And it's going to be a building that supports that collection with faculty, students, and the scholarship, but also the care of that collection. And it teaches all of the students really how to handle the collection. I think very importantly, it's not a museum. Bard does a great job with the exhibitions in 18, but this is really for hands-on work with the collection. So in many ways, it's not super precious. So we'll get into that in terms of how it's supported with its mechanical systems. It's really more of a classroom that's going to have objects everywhere in all the spaces. So this is a section of what's proposed. A little later, we'll show the evolution of how we got to the design. The red dashed line is the current profile of the building, and the addition of a one-story addition with mechanical rooftop equipment, and then a reconfiguration of the rear yard to maintain its 70% lot coverage, and then an addition in the rear yard up to the 23 feet for a community facility. So here you see, this is image of what is proposed. And again, we'll go into that in more detail in a moment. And I think the section is really illustrative of the restoration and preservation of the existing building. The gray is the existing structure, the reconfiguration of the back, a one-story addition with enclosed rooftop mechanical, and a rear yard expansion in the back at the lower level and the first floor. And just the outline. So I'm going to turn it over now to Ward to talk about the historic context, and then I'll get into more detail about the design.
Thank you, Susie. Good morning, all. Ward Dennis, Higgins Quaid Park and Partners. So I'm going to talk briefly about the history of this site and the history of the block, as well as the appropriateness of the design. So this is a map of the block in 1902. You know, the Upper West Side was well developed in this era, but this block took much longer to develop. On the western side of the block, there was a series of row houses that were constructed in the 1880s. On the eastern side of the block, closer to Central Park, was the Park Estate, which remained in a private estate until 1905. At which point it was sold, and between basically 1905, 1907, 1908, the rest of the block developed very quickly. The row houses on West 85th Street behind us in 1907, the large apartment buildings on Central Park West and Columbus in 1906, and then in 1908, our building at 8 is constructed. 8 and one of the other buildings on the block were townhouses. Most of the rest of the buildings on the block are row houses. So our building was never part of a row. It was always a one-off townhouse, and has always had that side of the east side alley exposure. So it has always had something of a three-dimensional appearance. Also notable, most of the buildings along 86th Street are 5-story plus basement. 8 West 86th Street, there's 4 stories plus basement, so slightly shorter than the other. In the 1920s to the early 1930s, a number of the row houses along 86th Street were taken down. new apartment buildings came up. The result being for 8 West 86th Street, that we're now sitting between these 2 larger apartment buildings. You can also see in this historic photo on the left, and you may have seen in some of the existing condition photos, 8 West 86th Street was designed really in that 3-dimensional way for the front pavilion at least. The finishes of the primary facade return onto the east facade as far back as the light port that you can see along the alleyway there. The building was constructed in 1908. It was built for Beatrice and Herbert Siegel, designed by architects Taylor and Levi. And also to note, sorry, on this photo, the balustrade that sits at the top of the building, which has been lost over time. Siegel was a doctor, specialized in treatment of syphilis, and he used the entire first floor as his offices and laboratory, with the family living on the upper floors and in the basement / cellar as the kitchen. And again, you can see in these historic plans that light port that sort of separates the front finished pavilion from the rear pavilion, which is constructed entirely and based in common ground. Taylor and Levi were prominent, somewhat eclectic architects in the early part of the 20th century. They specialized particularly in townhouses and smaller apartment buildings. I think it's interesting to note that all of their buildings seem to have this focus on the crown of the building, something that's been lost in our project with the removal of the balustrade, which we will be restoring. The photo on the left shows the 1940 condition. You can see that at that time, the front entrance with its fan light was still in place. In 1953, I believe, the building was converted to apartments, multi-family apartments. And at that time, we believe the front entrance was replaced with the existing front entrance with its flat transom. The balustrade seems to have been removed sometime in the late 20s, early 30s. There was a proposal approved by landmarks in the late 1990s to restore much of the building. Some of this work was done and some was not. So the existing condition is an amalgam of what you see in those historic images and some work that was done in the later 90s, early 2000s. So the windows were replaced at that time. Some work was done at the roof. Susie will show you some more details on the restorative work that we're proposing. But largely the front facade and that return facade on the east side are mostly intact with some alterations. The front door is still that flat transom that probably dates to the 1950s. And then you can see on the left how our building sits between these 2 larger apartment buildings sort of dwarfed on either side. And then along 86th Street, you can again see that up and down rhythm, the later apartment buildings, the early apartment buildings, the later apartment building, the row houses from the early 20th century, again, mostly 5-story plus basement, with 8 on the far left, far west. Susan and Susie both mentioned Bard's presence on the block. This is the 4th building that Bard will own or does own on the block. 18 was constructed in 1907, serves as the gallery and administration building. 36 and 38 are where the academics, public program, library are housed. And 8 will be the study collection. This is a view of some of the Bard buildings, showing the block context and then showing the expansions that Susan mentioned earlier that took place in the 90s and 2000. The first of those was 18 West 86th Street at the far left, which was enlarged by Spectre Group. That included a full height rear yard addition and a setback rooftop addition. And then 36 and 38 were done in two phases, the first in 1998, the second in 2008. Both were designed by Polchek Partnership, and Susie was the design principal in charge for both of those projects. They both included some extent of rear yard enlargements and rooftop additions, again, minimally visible. So all the work that is shown here and done in the past is similar in scope to what we are proposing at 8 West 86th Street. The palette of materials on 36 and 38, you can see here, brick, copper, materials that are very compatible and appropriate to the Beaux-Arts style of historic buildings. And similarly, our project will be using brick, copper, and terracotta, which works well with the design of 8 West 86th Street. Commission is familiar, I think, with many of these precedent projects, the Goethe Institute, Friends Seminary, and Spence School, all of them sort of representing the common approach to enlargements of institutional buildings, minimally visible rooftop additions, retention of front facade, and enlargement utilizing creatively as much space as possible at the basement and the rear of the building. We are proposing a very similar expansion to this, which I think is appropriate in terms of massing, design, and height. Again, the front pavilion of the building is being retained and restored, and the rear pavilion, which is common brick, is where most of the intervention is being done. The rooftop addition is well set back from the front facade, minimally visible, primarily visible only over that side alleyway, and designed very much in a way to not call attention to itself, and takes advantage of the restoration of the balustrade to conceal some of the visibility. So with that, I'll turn it back to Susie, and she will take you through some of the restoration work and then to the top.
So the proposed design in terms of the restoration and expansion, really the comprehensive approach to the restoration. And I'd say it's both visual and material, but also environmental. And that part of this will also be about creating a really highly insulated envelope and making this building really energy efficient as well. But so from top to bottom, the slate roof and the dormers to be restored and repaired, maintaining as much of the original material as possible. Then the condition of the building, as Susan said, it's not in great condition. It's been neglected for many years. So all the wood trim and the dormers, the limestone throughout, and then the brick, which in particular in the front and along the eastern return will require repointing and replacing brick where we can harvest it, where air conditioning units have been put in. And then there's the metal work that at one time was painted white, and we were considering that, but realized that it really wouldn't look very great in the context of today. So we're proposing to keep it black. Window replacements to match the existing. And I think importantly then the balustrade, strad, whichever you want to call it, and bringing that back to complete the building. And just as some examples of the Georgian revival and how important that is to this. And in these cases, obviously, as precedent, concealing some of what we were proposing as a rooftop addition. Another thing that's very important is how to make the building accessible, certainly in support of making everything open and accessible, but also by code. And we are proposing to remove the steps and make it a flush entrance and lowering a portion of the first floor. And also for egress, the need to have a secondary means independent egress. We are taking advantage of the lobby egress for one of the entrances, but because we only have one point of access to the street, we need to introduce another egress point. And you can see here that is the existing conditions, the two locations of where it is existing, and then the proposed. But I think along with making it accessible, it's reintroducing the original intent for the double door and the transom window over, which I think it will be really beautiful addition to the street, make it much more welcoming. As Ward said, it's a very unique condition because it's really sandwiched between these two large buildings and right near a service alley. So trying to make this open and accessible and really restore this back to life, it's going to be wonderful. So here you see the restored north facade adjacent to a photograph of the existing, a photo montage. And from top to bottom, again, the balustrade, the roof, all the repairs that I mentioned, as well as this new port of threshold. So this is a series of how we're going to propose to transform it. This is the existing conditions, 4-story building with a cellar. The intention is to fill in that side court to make the continuity of the floor plates much more contiguous. Then the next is to reconfigure the rear yard. There's sort of a small projecting volume in the rear yard you can see to the bottom left, and we'll be removing that. Many of those floors don't align with the floors of each of the floors. So by reconfiguring it and making it a clean back, it makes that, again, more purposeful space. And I think as the back is sort of, I'd say, under-designed compared to the front, I think this makes a more intentional rear yard proposition. And then with that, the 1-story addition set back from the street so that it isn't visible from the street. And then finally, the rear yard, 23 feet for community facility. And I'll explain the purpose of what that will be. Just in summary, though, it's a as of right construction, everything that we're proposing. It's 70% lot coverage in the 23-foot tall rear yard expansion and the 1-story rooftop addition, and then with the mechanical rooftop equipment, which will all be housed in custom enclosures to make sure that it's code compliant with 50 decibel levels. And this is what I showed you earlier, just a reminder of programmatically, as you walk in, the pinkish space for student exhibitions and welcome. But this is a student building. This isn't a public building. It's intended for students to be here and to do their work with their collections. And then the oversized collections in the rear yard top that a green roof, which will be both visually appealing, and I'll get into that a little bit more, but retaining stormwater and certainly helping with the heat island effect. Research spaces and classrooms above, and collections, workrooms in that reconfigured zone with seminar rooms. And I won't go into detail, but the planning of it is very clean and simple. Again, in the entire building will have collections throughout. So just a bit about the rear yard expansion for oversized collections. There are many that Bard currently has and then are part of the Bell collection. And these are just sort of showing dimensionally what they're about. But I think as that translates into really what can be done with that rear yard, we've sized it so that there is adequate space to hang the textiles, which is shows a range here, and there are even more coming in the Bell collection. And here's a view that just shows the both the rickshaw that's in their collection, the furniture, and the textiles for filling that rear yard expansion. Then the other piece is the green roof, as you can see, as it's this site, as I said, is unique adjacent to the service yard. Filling this will actually conceal that from many people on the block. And then we propose a sedum roof over the extent. It's not accessible at all. It's just going to be a visual amenity really to for everybody to look at, as well as to retain stormwater. And it's a extensive roof. So again, not meant for use. So here you see just the massing as proposed with the new entry, the new balustrade, and the restoration. And these are the elevations, seeing the front. This is all the existing. You can see that distinct difference between the front component and then the rear. And so respecting that and restoring the front of the building, and then adding on the reconfiguration of the rear yard, the one-story addition, maintaining a component of the common brick, and a new volume of terracotta, in keeping with the palette of the existing, a brick base with some articulation, both, and then at the rear yard, spaces where there will be new for people and offices in the rear, but translating and weaving together old and new, and a palette of materials that really supports and reinforces the existing, where you have the historic brick, remnants of the common brick as sort of an element, and the more floating volume of the terracotta, a lighter but beautiful material, and then a bit more articulate in the rear yard, and then with some spandrel panels of limestone, and the infill being zinc. And here, just to be, this before and after, the south facade, the proposed north facade with the one-story addition, and the enclosure for mechanical with zinc enclosure to be the same palette as the slate. And then here, the before and after. Just interesting that the two buildings, Chris Gray wrote this article that we found, the two buildings at either end actually use terracotta. The two large buildings that sort of bookend the block use terracotta in a very decorative, interesting way. So it seemed inspired the thought of using it in this new building somewhat differently. And then just examples of how terracotta has been a really beautiful material that we're seeing historically, and then in many new construction in historic districts. And then, of course, the visibility. We've looked at this really carefully. There is this condition of the side yard, so that makes the building a little bit more three-dimensional. And so we worked with the staff here. It's been really helpful, Dana, building the mock-up to comply with the diagram that they requested, showing the balustrade. But you do see how you see the side yard, some evidence of the addition. But as you quickly come directly on, the balustrade does effectively filter any views of what that would be. And here you can see the existing, the setbacks. It's overall sits back on two levels, so that you do not see that from the street. And then there is, because of the side yard, a glimmer of the view from 85th Street. It's really quite a sliver. And then here it's just a montage that gives you a sense, if you're really trying to look through that at that moment, above that, the metal gate, you can start to see the proposed and the. So I think that's it.
All right. Thank you very much. Are there questions, commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Chu.
On the two streets, there is a gateway and a drive that goes in the alley. Who accesses that alley?
As best I know, it's the two main buildings on 257 and 251 Central Park West, and it's for vehicles, it's for trash. There's a medical facility in the first 1 and 2 floors of 257, so they have deliveries there, but that's on not 8's property.
And it's not publicly accessible, it's closed.
No, and it has that metal gate.
Right, okay.
There on both ends.
On both ends.
All right. Any other questions? Okay, we're going to move to public testimony and we'll come back to you afterwards. And so as we work through the public testimony, we're going to begin with any in-person participants today. And after we move through our sign-in sheets and anyone else in the hearing room who would like to speak, we will then move to those participants who are on the Zoom. And we will work through the remote participants. And each member of the public has 3 minutes to speak, and we'll ask you to respect those timeframes so we can move through and ensure that everybody has an opportunity to speak. So we'll begin with Clayton Hemmert.
Good morning. I'm Clayton Hemmert. I'm from 10 West 36th Street. I'm a member of the board there. First of all, thanks to Landmarks for safeguarding New York City's heritage. Bard's buildings, the museum artifacts, they need to be climate controlled 24/7 with industrial HVAC units. Some of these already exist on our block. These rooftop units are like nothing else seen in our residential neighborhood, which is exclusively residential. The rooftop industrial mechanicals of an existing Bard building at 18 West 86th Street, which has been there for a while, hasn't been a good experience for us. Here's the sound that gets emitted occasionally by this Bard HVAC unit. It goes on day and night. It gets repaired from time to time. But the point is, when you introduce large infrastructure units relative to a residential neighborhood, it has unintended negative consequences. Some of these are hard to predict. At our building, 10 West 86th Street, our east-facing courtyard is immediately next to the proposed HVAC industrial units. We have 9 windows on each floor that face these units. Some of the windows are 2 feet away, some are 3 feet away on each floor. Emissions that are going to come out of these units when those windows are open can't be good for the health of those people who live here. Not to mention 2 of those windows of the 9 windows are service windows. 7 are kitchens. They are offices, work from home offices, because our lives have changed since COVID, and their bedrooms as well. So also in this east-facing courtyard of ours, next to the rooftop mechanicals, in the proposal, there's nothing that I've seen in the 81-page PDF that represents the proximity of this. I feel like there's been inadequate documentation provided, and it's where we live, it's where we work now. And I hope that the Landmarks purview is beyond the simple architectural criteria or the line of sight from the street. And I hope you consider more than that. Another environmental concern not addressed in the proposal is the Bard rear yard expansion, which will seal in a courtyard that is currently open for us right now, especially the airflow, which reaches the lower half of our building. Our building is 16 stories high. Right now, there's an opening that goes up there that provides airflow to the bottom 7 floors. That is going to be sealed off because of the rear yard expansion of Bard. That is going to create a permanent dead space in the area, and as well as closing off open light and views. The amount of people who are affected by this and the volume of residents is very different from the other Bard buildings on our block. And they have done a very nice job in architecturally restoring it. But there are 3 immediate buildings adjacent to this project. The other 2 buildings of Bard, they only have 1 building adjacent. So the amount of people affected are triple. There are hundreds of people affected. So it comes down to kind of a question of this. Is the building expansion, and Bard has said it's not open for the public. It's for warehousing artifacts in a climate controlled area, and it's for graduate students who leave at the end of the day. The question is it worth the compromise in quality of life, health, and the environment of the hundreds of people who live here and who make their homes here and make up the backbone of this community?
Okay.
So I ask you to consider the character and the fabric of the immediate neighborhood, not just the architecture elements involved. Thank
All
you for
right.
your time and your work.
Thank you very much. And I'll just remind everybody, we have a 3-minute time limit. Bernard Folly? Or Falk, maybe? Sorry if I can't read the writing.
Good day, everybody. I'm Bernard Falk. I'm a resident of 257 Central Park West, formerly a board president for 7 years of that building. As you know, Chapter 3, 25301 of Landmarks Preservation calls for public policy for protection, enforcement, perpetuation of landscape and the environment. Landscape is specifically defined as a tree. There's a spectacular verdant tree which gives beauty, health, and benefits to hundreds of people. I hear that fluffed away in the conversations. I think it should be mandated that that tree be preserved, protected, and if damaged, be replaced with a similar tree. This is a residential neighborhood. The extension will be visible not only from hundreds of apartments, but from the street. With all due respect, they're beautiful, elegant drawings, but they're only line drawings of one dimension. It really doesn't show you what it'll look like for the street. It's clearly visible. I'm speaking for myself, other people as well, that the extensions and the walls be green walls, basically, for the benefit of everybody, and even for that matter, for the Bard institution. I want to second the issue on the HVAC equipment. I understand HVAC equipment will be needed. I have a very simple, modest request, and that Landmarks insist that there be a qualified independent engineer that reviews and ensures that state-of-the-art, properly modulated, screened to the maximum, be implemented in that air conditioning system, and that it not merely be left up to the discretion of Bard. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anupam Lada?
Morning. My name is Anupam Lada. Wow. I'm on the board of 257 Central Park West, currently the president of the board. Thank you to Landmarks for giving us the opportunity to speak this morning. As you have probably seen from a number of different emails, we sent a pretty exhaustive letter with all our concerns on August 27th, which we forwarded to Landmarks in addition on September 5th, and I think yesterday. So we probably don't need to rehash all of our concerns. We did have the opportunity to meet with Bard last week, a week ago today. And as we've mentioned ad nauseum, we find that this process, considering the sheer number of residents that are impacted by this project, not just in 3 of the big buildings that are represented here, but also 2 townhouses that are next door. We're talking about hundreds of people, north of 500 collectively. The process has moved too quickly. Obviously, you saw the CB7 resolution that suggested and urged us to speak and urged the Landmarks Preservation Commission to consider delaying this hearing to allow for more time. We are where we are today, but we're hoping to have some fruitful conversations in the future. Just in terms of concerns, I don't think we need to rehash everything that was covered, but we obviously are very concerned about the HVAC noise and other noise that comes with this. There are 22 apartments at 257 Central Park West that are deeply impacted in terms of light and air. And I'll come back to the specific asks that we had of Bard at our meeting a week ago. And lastly, I wanted to spend a little bit of time on the rear yard because, at first it didn't resonate as much with me that was, one of the primary concerns here. And then I just realized that there was a reason that these donuts, these half blocks, these through blocks, whatever they were once technically called, were created. They are the culmination of the rear yards and back spaces for multiple buildings, multiple townhouses. There's a subtleness to them. There's a beauty to them. There's a greenscape to them. And, with the precedent that may have been set with the first Bard project, unfortunately, there's precedent for this, right? So be that as it may, we find that the rear yard as contemplated does not show sensitivity to not just the residents who live there, some of whom, have little light and air to begin with and look at trees, and now we'll look at nothing but this green wall, or sorry, the green roof. It's closing off, the block, it's closing off the alley. The second thing I should mention on the rear yard is there is an alleyway that is a quintessentially New York thing. You look through it from 85th to 86, and the mock-up that's up there currently is not representing the degree of obstruction. So if I can just highlight the asks that we made. So I'm sorry to take so long. So what we asked BARD for specifically, someone referenced it earlier, is that on the west-facing wall from our building, from 257 Central Park West, we've been around since 1906, we have requested that they respect the materials that they have presented to you here, but that they do layer on a green wall over it, whether, we can discuss whether that's natural or artificial, but something that provides some relief to the dozens and dozens of residents who are losing light and air and will be obstructed. Again, just greenery on top of the existing materials that they proposed. We did have some asks for them around noise and HVAC, et cetera. And with that, I'll conclude. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Esther Simons.
Good afternoon. I'm Esther Simons. I live at 257 Central Park West. Is the microphone on?
It's on. Yeah. You can speak, if you can speak a little bit louder, that will help.
I just didn't want that muffled sound that I heard earlier. In the interest of time, I don't want to repeat anything that's been said by Clayton at number 10 West or Bernard at number 257, which is the building I'm in, but I'm still a little bit unclear as to exactly the addition to the existing footprint that will be taking place. I'm hearing that a tree is going to come down. I believe that's the tree that I've been looking at for the last 24 years. Every autumn, it changes into an indigo of colors that I don't see in any other tree in Central Park when I walk through the park. It's a very, very unique tree. I'm very nervous at the prospect of it coming down. I invite you all to come and look in our apartment. In about 1 month, it will be peak foliage for that tree. So that's very upsetting to me. And I just want to understand how the footprint will change from the existing footprint of number 8 West 86th Street, the proposed project. Ironically, BARD, which has a long and storied, no pun intended, history aimed at preserving art and culture from centuries ago, is hypocritically failing to preserve today, in the year 2024, the beauty and nature and streetscape of this block. Rather, from what I'm hearing, there will be a removal of beauty and nature and some environmentally questionable need more answers situation. I'm very upset about the adverse impact that the BARD proposal will have for our block. And I submit that the BARD project should only be approved if it preserves the historical and aesthetic quality of life on this block for the hundreds of people who will be adversely affected. And that it will be preserved not just for today, but for always, as BARD has painstakingly spent many years and many millions of dollars preserving its own art and culture from centuries ago. I'd also like to add,
and if you could sort of wrap it up, that would be great.
Sure. As you can see, we're just individuals who've taken time off from work to be here. We don't have minions of people and presentations to show you to plead our case. And I trust that our case will be given every fair chance. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Garth Simons.
I've lived at 257 Central Park West for 24 years.
Could you please state your, could you please just state your name for the record?
Gar Simons. So the historical ambience and lifestyle of this block should be preserved. The BARD proposal would adversely affect this. The BARD proposal would turn what was originally a residential building into a much larger building for non-residential use. It's not consistent with the buildings on this block. The block features low noise emitted from the residences from their HVAC and mechanical systems, and this greatly contributes to the residential environment for the residences on the street. On the BARD proposal, there'd be industrial level air conditioning that will run all day, all year round. The quality of life for the neighboring apartments would be adversely affected. The BARD HVAC and mechanical system should be scaled back to what a typical residential building on 86th Street should have. And there's been no evaluation of the impact of these systems on BARD's neighbours. The historical existing block provides for light and air for neighbouring buildings. The BARD proposal, particularly its rear yard extension, will significantly reduce the light and air for a significant number of apartments, neighbouring apartments. Certainly from our perspective, the BARD proposal will adversely affect our view to the west from our master bedroom, which consists of trees and greenery in the rear yard of the properties on 86th Street, almost as far as the eye can see. This represents the loss of a wonderful historical amenity associated with the historical development of the residences on 86th Street. The BARD proposal will cause serious disruption to life on 86th Street as it has been lived for a long time. So I'm very upset about the adverse effect the BARD proposal will have for our block. And I submit the BARD project should only be approved if it preserves the historical and aesthetic quality of life on this block for my family, for other residents of our building and neighbouring buildings. The BARD project will need to be significantly amended to achieve this result. Thank you.
Thank you. Patricia Ting.
Hi, I'm Patricia Ting. I have been a resident of 257 Central Park West for 20 years. I've lived in the Upper West Side for 25 years. I love the area where we are right now, the historical district around 86th Street. You walk around and the brownstone, they are gorgeous and they're flanked by really gorgeous historical buildings. The proposal, the expansion proposal by BARD will drastically change that. You can, I wouldn't say you can see some visibility, you can see a lot of the extension from the 86th Street corner around Central Park West. I have stood in that area many times the last couple of weeks, and I can just visualize the horrific eyesore that is going to become of that building. And I question whether if this extension is approved, does that mean any education institution can basically go into a landmark historical district and start building up? Does that mean all the brownstone in the beautiful landmark area will be able to be built upwards so that now you'll be seeing an eyesore of a extension upwards? The area, the historical nature and the character of this residential block is stunning. So I urge, please, for us to consider preserving the gorgeous building architecture, character, residential feeling of this area. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the room who would like to speak on this item? Yeah. Okay, so you don't want to, okay. All right, noting that there is no one else in the room to speak on this item, I will turn it over to Gregory Kalla, who will take us through the remote participants.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair Carroll. We have a few hands raised in our remote attendee list. The first we'll be hearing from is Seth Haberman. Seth Haberman, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. Okay. And once you have joined as panelist, please make sure to unmute your line and state your name for the record, and you will have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Greg, can I share a picture? I made just a few snapshots.
I'm sorry, Seth. No, you can't share a photo.
Okay, because so I'm Seth Haberman. I live at 251 Central Park West. I've lived there since 1968, other than a little bit of time in New Haven. What I wanted to share was a view of the block, but not the way you see it from the street, but way the residents see it. We used to call these half streets. It was between 85th and 86th, between 85th and 84th. And if you look from any rooftop on a brownstone or any of the apartment buildings in the corner, you see there's a strip of green, of light and air that was purposefully designed. If you look on between 85th and 86th Street, there's one piece that gets obscured, which is the Bard building further down, which encroaches very closely to the neighboring building on 85th Street. And it sort of takes away from the character of what these once meant. If you ever sit in the back of a brownstone, you have a great appreciation for what that means to the neighborhood of that light and air and things like that. And this is going to obscure it. And I took a picture from the roof of 251 Central Park West, which I thought I'd be able to share because it's much more articulate than my ability to describe it. But there's a pitch black well next to the first 3 floors in 10 West 86th Street. That's going to be extended 2 floors. They're going to be, it's not even close. It's very simple to see. And so, I feel like the presentation is lacking from trying to show a complete picture. That's why I thought if this is a hearing, we'd want to be able to show these complete pictures. Given that I can't in this case, I'd invite Landmarks to at least look beyond the presentation, which obscures the lack of light and the change in character of this sort of what we called half blocks until they can study it formally, because it's just not shown in any of the presentation materials. And I guess I don't have the ability to show it now, and I've prepared a little presentation. So it's very hard to describe a photograph, but you can see there's a black well of light, which will be extended 2 more floors up in 10 West 85th Street. Those people will get no light at all. And that whole block, which used to be able to, you could actually look down the block if you tiptoed over the wall, which is now between 10 West and 257. It's obscured because a building juts out. It's got open exposed air conditioning. That's the Bard building down the block. And I think the people who live next door are rightly scared that the same thing is going to happen. You're going to have something that's out of character for the neighborhood and certainly out of character for that building. There's a reason we had setbacks. There was a reason the zoning had those setbacks. It was to preserve light and air and the character of those pieces. And so I understand that they have a legal right to build it. It doesn't mean that it's right. And I share the view of other people, which is that all we want, I don't think there's anyone who's against Bard on the block, but all we want is the same considerations that are being put forth of the interior of the building to be put forth of the exterior building. Treat the residents and your neighbors as well as you treat the inanimate objects.
Okay. Thank you so much for your testimony.
Is there a way I can share these photographs as part of the public process?
You can email them to me after the hearing if you'd like.
Thank you, Gregory.
So much for your testimony.
Bye-bye.
And next up, we'll be hearing from Megan Fitzpatrick from Landmark West. Megan Fitzpatrick, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. And once you are a panelist, please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hello, Commissioners. Megan Fitzpatrick speaking on behalf of Landmark West.
The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee is happy to see new life brought to this beautiful historic row house. We are glad significant restoration efforts are being made, including the restoration of the historic balustrade. We believe the balustrade will be very effective in limiting the visibility of the proposed rooftop addition from the street level. We appreciate the applicant considering our reservations about the originally proposed white paint on the railings and its suitability in the present day. Most railings on West 86th Street are now painted black, and we were concerned it could affect the uniformity of the block. The loss of the secondary window at the entrance level is regrettable, however, but we understand that the applicant had limited alternatives. We do have some concerns about the impact the proposal will have on neighbours, mostly the rear yard extension upon the dogleg, which will essentially seal in the courtyard of 10 West 86th Street, reducing some light and air from reaching the lower floors of the building. The development at this site will prove to change the quality of life for adjacent residents and poses not only social but also environmental concerns. The potential noise emitting from industrial level air conditioning will run all day, all year round to facilitate collections management is another quality of life concern. Our committee would like the applicant to evaluate the potential impact of noise and heat on nearby neighbours and what type of HVAC systems will be installed. We urge the applicant to consider the concerns of neighbours and take steps to mitigate these impacts and preserve the quality of life for our community. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we'll be hearing from Darrell Prescott. Darrell Prescott, I am promoting you to panelist right now. And once you are a panelist, please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Could you please state your name?
Yes, I'm Darrell Prescott. I'm currently president of the board at 10 West 86th Street. I second many of the things that have been said by our neighbors and only want to supplement what Landmark West has pointed out and what our board member Clayton Hemmert has pointed out. And that is, we remain concerned about the complete enclosure of our side, which is an east-facing courtyard. It will be completely enclosed up to level 6, floor 6 plus 7 if you consider the rooftop mechanicals. And you can visualize that if you look at slides 24, 39, 41, 59, and 60. Currently, we have ventilation there. These are kitchen windows, and we would be very grateful if accommodation could be made to retain that ventilation. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we'll be hearing from Joshua Massey. Joshua Massey, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Joshua Massey, and I'm a PhD student and alumni of the master's program at Bard Graduate Center, where I study American material culture. When I came to the program as a master's student in 2021, I wanted to learn more about the world around me through its objects, but I wasn't quite sure where to start. So many things offered themselves up to me: ceramics, glassware, metalwork, textiles, and the variety was almost overwhelming. At that time, I began to work as BGC's Study Collection Fellow, which allowed me to interact with and learn from objects every day as part of my job. Through exposure to these thousands of objects in the study collection, I started to piece together what many objects then unknown to me were and how they were made, thus expanding my knowledge of the material world and many of the world's rich cultures. This inspired me to build a collection of my own as I worked through the coursework for the MA and the PhD programs, and has helped me to hone my own research interests as I continue dissertation work. Bard Graduate Center's expansion into 8 West 86th Street, I think, is welcome and much needed addition to the existing facilities at 18 and 38 West 86th Street. As BGC's focus has, over 30 years, shifted from European decorative arts to a more global cultural frame, the study collection has expanded now well beyond its original space to include several thousand objects. We need a purpose-built, climate-controlled space for these objects, so we might not only continue to preserve and protect those that we already have, but to accommodate new additions to the collection so myself and hundreds of future students, faculty, and visiting researchers can benefit from it in the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we'll be hearing from Janet Borelli. Janet Borelli, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. And once you are a panelist, please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if you could see me.
We can hear you.
Okay, that's fine. So I want to, instead of reiterating everything, Janet Borelli, I live at 257 Central Park West. And instead of reiterating everything that my lovely building people, I wanted to just say that I commend Bard on their work, and I think it's wonderful. I just feel as though the work that they're doing to expand, particularly in the outside extension, does disrupt the quality, not only of life, but the beauty of the area. And I have no problem with what they want to do internally, but I do feel that externally, I would like to reiterate that the drawings are not as complete to see the effect that it may have in the view from not only the people that live in the buildings, but from the street level. They are one-dimensional. And I would really ask and implore you to put a delay on the approval so that we can come to a mutual agreement for everyone to enjoy the life that we have here, as well as Bard being able to create what they're looking at. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. And next up, we will be hearing from Christina Conroy. Christina Conroy, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Christina Conroy for the Victorian Society, New York. Now, when reviewing applications like this one from important and often beloved New York City institutions like the Bard Graduate Center, we sometimes find it difficult to remain focused on the actual proposal. Endorsement of the good work of these institutions described in their presentations and often in effusive public testimony should not color our mandate to support the preservation of the actual fabric of New York's designated landmarks. In this case, despite our appreciation for all Bard does, we do not feel the proposed changes are entirely appropriate. One would not know that the new rear yard elevations proposed have any connection to the historic house itself. Perhaps that's right, given the hemmed-in conditions with much taller buildings at other side and limited visibility. How the additions will, however, have an adverse effect on the small yard of the house to the south and its flowering backyard tree. We think is not all right that these changes are proposed for the front elevation. The perfectly balanced symmetry of the facade would be destroyed by the removal of historic brick, the creation of a door to replace one of the ground floor windows, the removal of the steps at the main entry would alter for the worse the carefully designed and perfect proportions. Together, these changes would severely compromise the facade. We believe there are better solutions to both problems. Now, regarding the second floor, the building's code provision for a, quote, street floor lobby should be considered. This allows for multiple means of egress to join at a single lobby that opens directly to the street. That is in fact the current egress from the stair hall works. At the stoop, we believe that this appearing stairs solution, which the commission approved recently at another building, could work here. Such an installation would not only maintain the historic appearance, but it would avoid the necessity of lowering the floor level, which will require reconstructing a significant part of the first floor interior. Now, whether these suggestions are viable or not, the proposal for this facade as presented is not appropriate. Thank you, commissioners.
And thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we'll be hearing from Deborah Crone. Deborah Crone, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. And once you are made panelist, please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Deborah Crone. I have been a professor at the Bard Graduate Center for 22 years, where I teach classes about Renaissance domestic arts book history and museum studies. I am also the department chair of the academic side of the BGC, and I'm also head of our focus project, where we put on smaller exhibitions using local objects and objects from our own collections. So I work very closely with faculty and with students on these exhibitions, especially from our study collection, and provide students with a chance to work on an exhibition from conception to completion, as well as giving the faculty an opportunity to output their research in the form of an exhibition. I'm sure that many of the neighbors who have spoken this morning have been to these exhibitions, and I hope that they have found them edifying and beautiful and interesting. Our new study center, which is the primary function of 8 West 86th Street, will give us a chance to have many more objects to work with for these exhibitions, and will also provide much needed classrooms and workshop spaces to study the objects while we prepare the exhibitions that will then be mounted in 18 West 86th Street, not in 8 West. So this will not be an exhibition building. It'll be a unique facility which can both provide collections storage, as well as, together with our library, provide outstanding resources for learning and for study. I'm a resident of the Upper West Side as well, and I welcome the opportunity to continue to build cultural capital in a neighborhood where I both work and live. Training our students to become culturally aware and knowledgeable curators and scholars is one of our primary goals, and the ability to study a variety of cultures through their artifacts is an important part of this training. The new study center will be essential in helping us to achieve this mission. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your Thank you so much for your testimony. And next up, we'll be hearing from Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. Lucy Levine, I am promoting you to panelist right now. And once you are made panelist, please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. HDC is largely supportive of this proposal, and we are especially pleased that the main entrance will be at grade and accessible so that everyone can enter through the front door. We ask that for the second means of egress, the applicant consider using the allowance within the code for a street floor lobby, which would allow the applicant to maintain the ground floor window on the west side of the facade and thereby retain significant historic fabric while also maintaining the building's design symmetry. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for your testimony. I am looking through the attendees list now, and I do not see any further hands raised. If you would like to speak on this item, please click the raise hand button now. Okay, no more hands are raised, so I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 7 recommends approval regarding the facade work as appropriate to the building and to the historic district, and commends the applicant for its sensitive restoration, approval of the east facade infill and the 2 rear yard additions. And okay, I see that there is one further hand raised. Should we call on him?
Yeah, do you want to finish, just finish the
Okay,
one you're doing?
I will
and then-
finish
yeah.
the community board recommendation. Approval regarding the east facade infill, the 2 rear yard additions, and the rooftop addition and the enclosed mechanicals as reasonably appropriate to the building and to the historic district. And they take no position regarding the paint color of the decorative work. I'll also note that we received 5 additional letters recommending denial from individuals and 1 recommending approval. And with that, I will call on Vivian now. So Vivian, I am promoting you to panelist right now. And once you are made panelist, please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Vivian Falk, and I'm a resident of 257 Central Park West. And I have been patiently listening to all that's presented on both sides of the issue. And I keep hearing the word our artifacts, our collection, the value of learning from our artifacts. And I think that this is remiss in thinking of the value of life and the quality of life for the families that are adjacent to this backyard extension. I can't help thinking that an artifact could be placed elsewhere and that the quality of life that is so impacted for so many people ought to take precedent over a collection of artifacts. And I do understand the nature of the value of studying them. And the Bard is an excellent institution. There's no question. I just think that more should be taken into account for the quality of life of those on both sides adjacent to this rear yard expansion. In addition to the fact that the verdant tree that is really an amazing part of these backyard structures should be considered. There's no talk of what that does to the air, the light, and the greenery of the back. To others, it's the back. To those living there, it's their life source. It's their front. It's not really their back, it's your back. And I think that this should be considered, and I hope that you will do so in allowing or not allowing the extended expansion in the rear of the Bard proposal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. Okay, I do not see any further hands raised. If you would like to speak, please click the raise hand button. Final call. Okay, no further hands raised, and I will bring that back to you, Chair Carroll.
All right, thank you very much. So I'd like to turn to the team and ask if you'd like to respond to the comments we've heard.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Valerie Campbell. I'm Land Use Counsel to the Bard Graduate Center. We would like to respond, and I think Susie Rodriguez will give some detailed responses. But I would like to sort of note from the outset that this is both an as-of-right use and an as-of-rightness. So everything that is being proposed is 100% compliant with the zoning, and in fact is much less in terms of the allowable envelope than is allowed in this district, which is a 10 FAR district. So, and in terms of precedent, I think what Bard is proposing is well within what the commission has approved for other institutions in historic districts. It's actually much less than many. And as I said, it is as of right. We have, throughout the process, Bard has reached out to the neighbors. Before we even had the community board meeting, we had a meeting with the neighbors to introduce them to the project. Where we had the architects and Bard present at that meeting. When we learned at the community board meeting that some of the neighbors, particularly I think 257 Central Park West, were not aware of the meeting, we then met with them again, and we've met with them subsequently. So in the course of our meetings, we've shared our acoustical reports, we've shared shadow studies, we've talked about things that will happen during construction, some of which we can't discuss right now because it's simply a little too early. We don't have the construction manager on board as part of the project, but we understand their concerns.
The tree, just Susie will also talk about it. It's not on Bard's property. It's actually on one of the 85th Street properties. It's a Chinese sumac tree. They're grow quite large. They have extensive root systems. And one of the issues is that their roots have damaged the rear walls, both of Bard and other neighbors. So we don't have the ability to take down that tree. We do need to have the owner of the property where the tree is located deal with the roots, because they're creating a problem for a number of neighbors. So I think that's really sort of set a context, and I think Susie can then address the specific issues, particularly relating to HVAC, because I think the HVAC equipment has been sort of mischaracterized, both in terms of the nature of it and its potential impact. And Susie can really set that straight.
I'm going to have to refer to some specifics because we've been working with our mechanical engineer to basically comply with code, which is 50 decibel levels. And with that, that's almost like a quiet conversation. Anybody can Google it or Wikipedia it. But it's something we've been working hard on because we know it's a challenge. But to the advantage that I said earlier, it's not a museum. The type of mechanical system here is not for protecting museum grade collection. So because of that, we're able to have a much more, make a more normal average mechanical system for a academic building. So with that, excuse the technical nature of this, but I think it's sort of important. The building operates probably more like 8 to 6. Because of that, that's when people will be in there. So the comfort of the facility is important. But it is being designed with 2 zones. There's a perimeter zone, and then there's the rest of the mechanical system. The perimeter zone has these locally managed interior units, and those interior units only provide fresh air from the roof. But because of that, we're able to downsize the equipment on the roof. And the equipment on the roof, we are looking into trying to have an all-electric system in terms of environmental issues. But the local fan coils on each floor make that system a lot smaller. And the fact that it's also not a museum, the temperature and humidity control levels are much different. It's here, again, sorry for the technical, but it's 74 degrees in the summer, plus or minus 2 degrees with 50% relative humidity. All of this to say winter 70 degrees Fahrenheit, 40% relative humidity. But this ability to have greater differential in the environment makes it a much more efficient system, and it makes it run less. And the fact is, at the end of the day, although the fans can be turned significantly down, et cetera, but backing way up, the operation of this system cannot exceed 50 decibels. And we actually did a study because we were like, what are we up against? Can this be achieved? And the current condition, without anything that's proposed, exceeds code. So nothing that we do will make it worse. It can't by code, but it's already in the 57 decibel level. And then there's much more extreme decibel levels. So I don't think there's in jeopardy. I think we all take this very seriously and we know what we have to do. And I think that's very important. Also, there's a lot of things to respond to. In terms of the light and air, there are supplemental materials to this submission that actually look at that very carefully. And I think many people have characterized it from the community correctly, that with this 2 stories, it will increase the condition that exists at 10 in the well by 2 stories. So that is accurate, and that is an as-of-right allowance to do so. Hold on. Well, if you want me to, I will. Thank you, though. The street floor lobby suggestion, great idea if we could do it. We're taking advantage of it for one of our means of egress. We have, for 68 code, have a scissor stair. And so one of those exit into the street lobby, but if we had a through block condition, we would have two discrete means of egress. We don't. We only have exposure on 86th Street. And because of that, we do need to introduce another independent means of egress. So we are taking advantage of it, at least for 50%. The other piece I think is really important is the nature of the rear yard expansion. The rear yard at 86th Street between Columbus and Central Park West is not a pure rear yard, particularly because of larger buildings along 86th Street that have been added. They encroach and have since the early part of, at least 100 years into that. I think that this, the other thing is we have, I would say, often fairly unsightly service yard. And in some ways, this will be a benefit because it will, it's at the end of the block adjacent to the service yard. So is somebody helping me? I should probably find it. All right, this is very slow moving. So I think that the rear yard addition actually is in a place that buffers a lot of that and will actually add a significant piece of green to that experience from many of the views looking from Central Park West. So the other fact of that is that many of the lower floors of 257 actually are the medical offices. So I think the proximity to that, not all of them, I'm just saying some, but so the proximity of that is something that should be considered in that. I think Val answered the issue of the tree. I think if you do Wikipedia, it is also great home to the lanternfly. But it is, they don't tend to exceed 50 years. It's a premature tree, and it is structurally, our structural engineers are very concerned about the condition of the tree at that area. Okay, let's see. Oh, and back to the rear yard. I think most of any of that is up against actually the blank wall at 10. I think that the encroachment is the extension of the upper piece that starts to block off. It could just extend that condition to stories. I think that's it.
Okay, Commissioner Goldblum.
Couple of questions.
Yes.
In the picture we're looking at, the level of the driveway, is that more or less street level?
Down about 7 or 8 feet.
Okay, so it's down and your grade, your 23 feet is coming from street grade. So at this level, you're going to be about up at the height of the second floor windows of that apartment building. Yeah, I remember the section. There we go. Okay, so you're about how many feet above your grade? Looks like it's around 20 something.
I think it's
plus about 6. So yeah, 25.
Good. Second question, for the egress, would it be possible for your second means of egress to go to the cellar and then out through the well?
It's not adequate in dimension. We had hoped
Too skinny.
had that all planned. So we had to come back and make an amendment because it couldn't comply. It's both compressed in height and
Got it.
and width.
Thank you.
all right. Other questions? Okay, so if there are no other final questions, we'll go ahead and make a motion to close the hearing and begin our discussion. Commissioner Jefferson, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Master, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion on this project. And which is for this house that was originally built as an individual house, not part of a row, and has subsequently had apartment buildings built up around it. And it was also designed with a front portion that where the designed facades wrapped the corner, and then after a light court, the building has been constructed in common brick. And so the proposal is to retain that front portion and the reading of that front portion, and to replace everything from the light court on with new rear yard rooftop additions, and then a further rear extension that for a community facility that rises 23 feet as allowed by code. And then at the front, there is a lot of restoration work and some modifications for egress and barrier-free access. Those kinds of changes are, I'm glad that we explored the options for the egress. And we have in other cases, particularly in adaptive reuse, found turning windows into doors, even in a small symmetrical facade, to be an appropriate way to deal with that. So we'll discuss that. The front work also includes restoring a balustrade that obscures some of the rooftop addition from view. I will note that we don't regulate noise, light, and air. And while we are sympathetic and certainly sympathetic to quality of life issues, those are not under our jurisdiction. And so we will be speaking about this project in terms of what's being removed and the what's being proposed in its place in terms of its relationship to the building and the central green space. And we'll be discussing the architectural qualities of it, the scale, materials, massing, and design. So with that, we'll begin our discussion. Vice Chair Bland, would you like to start this one?
Yes. Well, as has been proved yet again, it's often a very difficult thing these days to change and add something to our extraordinarily now built up mature city. So these pluses always come with collateral issues that we deal with. And I'm glad Sarah has yet again explained that many of the issues that have made the testimony here today, those issues, although we empathize, we don't directly deal with them. So I'll try also not to deal with them, but also we'll try also to suggest to the applicant and this very qualified team that every effort to mitigate the issues that have been raised, particularly those that can be dealt with in terms of sound, particularly speaking of sound, can be dealt with. But aren't we? We're moving soon too. Somebody said. I think this is a very interesting, from an architectural and preservation point of view, a very interesting and wholly appropriate application to us. The restoration of the balustrade, the lowering of the doorway to allow universal access, I think is all, and other aspects of the preservation issues on the facade, I think are wonderful. So I guess, the issue for me, and frankly, an exciting one, although I realize that it brings a loss of some or change to the issue regarding a rear yard, when that rear yard is now going to be built on. These are inevitable sorts of changes that I think we have to confront in our city. Don't always have to accept them, but I think in this case that zoning and planning issues have suggested this is how we build our city. I accept them. The question is then, is it too big, too bulky, what does it look like? And I don't think it's too big or bulky. I think the massing is quite acceptable. Adding that balustrade is not only a good piece of historic preservation, but it also is a shield for seeing, at least in some degree, seeing the bigger mass behind it. In terms of architectural style, again, this is hardly visible. It is visible to the neighbors, but that's not, again, our concern. It's the concern of visibility from the public way, and it's very marginally visible from the public way. But nonetheless, I want to applaud the idea of building a contemporary home for a contemporary institution. And I think what Susie has done here in terms of architecture is a wonderful melding of new with the old. It's transformative in this adaptive reuse. I like the term transformative more and more because it implies a change. It implies the new ensemble is new as for today, but it's old as well. It's kind of our city in a nutshell. And I think that's what's so great about the city. The applicant here, or the architect, is using a beautiful blend of materials that relate to, but are happily related to the existing building. So I don't see a reason to fault or even suggest any change, although others following me may have ideas.
Yeah, sure. I obviously, to echo Commissioner Bland's remarks, that unfortunately, or fortunately, we don't govern light, air, and quality of life, and it's anyway. There's nothing that we can really do about that except to urge the applicant to do what they can to mitigate those effects. So in the looking at it from our perspective, the front facade, I think the removal of the steps, the insertion of the transom, the providing additional doorway by lowering the window are all appropriate to providing access to the building for an institution. And while they are adding a lot of bulk between the the rear yard and roof additions, we traditionally have given a lot of support to institutions that need to expand to fulfill their mission. In this case, the building is not part of a row. It's between two much larger apartment buildings. And they've set back the rear addition from the front. And the backyard is, again, between these larger buildings, and the area is already paved mostly. So I find this appropriate in general. I agree with Commissioner Bland's remarks about the architecture. One thing I would say is that I think the balustrade addition is a good idea, but I feel like that if they slanted back the front of that top addition a little bit, that perhaps they could, to a degree, minimize what you do see from across the street, because generally, it is the addition, the rooftop addition appears to be visible from not only the sliver, but across the street. And I think maybe it could minimize that visibility from across the street. So that would be my principal comment on the project.
Thank you. Commissioner Lutfi.
So, of course, I echo the sentiments that you and Fred and Diana mentioned about, the unfortunate byproduct of some of these projects that, deal with daily life, light and air, etc. And I appreciate the fact that the board team is aware of this and is to the best of its ability, will, as the project moves forward, try to address whatever it can only do what it can do, and we can only really speak to what is within our purview. I mean, BARD is a great institution. It's a great academic institution, a great nurturer of young artists, and I respect the institution very well, and I also respect the work that it has done on the other buildings it owns. If you look at them, it has done an amazing job on 8 and 3638 to restore where it can and respect the history of what was on of what those buildings are and what surrounds them. And I think they're doing that here. On the facade of this building, all of the changes and additions that they're making were very, very well. The new doors, the black finish on the iron, the work on the windows, and maintaining, the white surrounds, replacing the white balustrade, and the work to provide barrier-free access and a second means of egress is also so thoughtfully and respectfully done. I do not think it detracts from this building in any way. In terms of the addition, I can't, when I look at the their plan, I have to say it couldn't be more efficiently laid out. And it's so logical. I believe that from what I can see, to the best of their ability, they've tried to make the mass as compact as it could possibly be. I also really respect what they've done in terms of the green element, especially the work on the roof. And I would encourage you to continue to look at that and see how that can be enhanced in any way possible. So I think this is a terrific project, and it will be an appropriate addition.
Thank you. Commissioner Chu.
Yeah, I share the sentiment of my previous commissioner's comments. I also just wanted to say Fred's comment about our city, the urban fabric, and the changes that time brings is something we're constantly dealing with. If I look at some of the historic maps that were presented here, the neighboring building, I think it's 10 West 86, which came after and replaced some smaller houses. At that time, I'm sure the houses felt like there was a monster coming into their neighbor. So things change. The thing that I do respect about this proposal is that there's a big effort to preserve and restore this great house. And this applicant has proven to be a good steward of our historic properties, and invest in the historic scale. I think the addition that's being proposed in the larger scale of this block is relatively small. The masses on either side are much larger and probably affect the light and shadow in a much greater way. This is a very small house in comparison to those masses. In terms of the specific proposals being made, I think the balustrade makes a lot of sense. It was in the historic facade, and that's being brought back. Accessibility is something that we're constantly seeing here at the Commission, and I think what's being proposed is the most minimal effect that we can do to this facade to make it welcoming and accessible, which is a huge priority right now in our city. I think that the applicant can work with staff on the door height. I'm not really sure about the change in the height, but that's, I think, something can be done at a staff level. I think the applicant explained the acoustic concern, which I think we've heard a lot of testimony about the acoustics. That just needs to meet code. So it is a scientific thing. It needs to meet it for those residential windows, and the applicant just must comply. The additions are all as of right, which is, I think, something that swings this also in the favor of the applicant. There's nothing here that's being asked for that is not as of right for this site. Yes, the FAR is 10, which is huge. And that is some of what we're dealing with our city in terms of new construction. Things are getting bigger. So I think this is, as Jeannie mentioned, looking at the scheme, the section, the plans, it's extending the existing floor elevations. It's not trying to alter them for a small dimension in the back. The lower volume below is as of right. You're allowed a single story taller floor. And I think that portion of the site as it is a dark area because of the large masses surrounding it. So I do think it's appropriate. I also think that it is appreciated that a green roof is being placed on it that is not occupiable. I heard the applicants say that, which will reduce any concern of sound and commotion on a rooftop, and does add value to that inner open space, which is not a very open green space. And we've seen a lot of cases where we really needed to preserve it because it existed as a very open space. This one has been violated over and over again. And I think that's also lends to the appropriateness of this addition.
Thank you, Commissioner Master.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the comments of my fellow commissioners. And I sympathize with a lot of the folks, the neighbors who have come to testify. I understand your concerns, but as Sarah has said, these are really not within our purview. I also feel that BARD has really tried to take into consideration a lot of the needs of the neighbors with the green roof. And I think the rear yard addition, I think that they tried to be fairly efficient, as Jeannie has mentioned. In terms of the front facade, I think that the reintroduction of the balustrade is attractive and serves its purpose. The new front entrance and the front door is also, I think, significantly more attractive than what we have now, and provides ADA access. Modifying the window also in the front into a door also serves a purpose, and I can find that appropriate. And then the rear yard addition, I think, is minimally visible. And I think that is certainly, I think, within the massing, I can find it appropriate, especially given that they could have probably gone a lot more as of right. But it really is minimally visible. So I can find the whole project appropriate.
Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
So the question for me was, how does 70% lot coverage affect a historic building? And how does an architect deal with that? How can you connect the historic building to this new lot coverage? And I think when you look at the east facade of this building, you see that the architect mastered how to put the pieces together. It's really a beautiful collage of modern material, and it's not going to be seen at all. The effort that was put in to make it such a beautiful composition, I admire. I think the issue of the rooftop addition, of course, the main entrance makes sense, handicap issues. I mean, most of the issues have to do with function. But in terms of the artistry of this type of building, the issues it sets up for the community is whether we'll be dealing with forever. But the architecture here is amazing.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
Thank you. I agree with the general sentiment of the commission. The way I look at it, the way I've kind of been thinking about this project is, how does it fit into the commission's general view of modifications to townhouses? And I think that within that category, of which we've seen a few today, we see a few every week, it's kind of probably our greatest hit is townhouse modifications. So there's lots and lots of ways to see this as a part of that pattern. The subcategory that this fits into is modifications of buildings in historic districts for community facilities, for schools and other buildings that serve the public. So you can't view this, I don't view this in terms of a typical townhouse, but I view it in terms of how we've looked at other community facility structures that want to do adaptive reuses of residential buildings. And so from that score, I think it is exemplary. The rooftop, the front facade modifications are modest and are unavoidable, and don't significantly impact the house. The addition of the grill on the top, the balustrade is lovely. I'm intrigued by the photographs that show the metalwork as being white, and I wonder if that is in fact original. And I would suggest, I mean, clearly the black is the aesthetically pleasing, neighborly, demure option. I would suggest that they do a little scraping and see if one can find historic evidence of it. Because the balustrade is being painted in the white, which was, as far as we know, the historic color. I think even though it might not be as demure, it might be interesting and historically accurate to consider painting it a different color, whether it was white or tan or something else, if that proves to be historically accurate, although I wouldn't withhold my vote for that. I think the front door modifications are fine. The rooftop addition is partially visible, and I think it's reasonable in its scale. We've approved much more significant visible additions for this use, this kind of adaptive reuse in the past. So I think it's reasonable. I think that one of the things that's most intriguing about this house is that it's always been visible from the side, which is an unusual condition for a building of this type. And it was something that the original architect recognized. And my biggest concern with this at the outset was the fact that it does something that we never allow townhouse modifications to do, or almost never, which is to completely obscure the volume of the building, right? We usually insist on the retention of the top floor of the building at the back so that the building can read as a volume. This scheme does not do it. I think that, and it did cause me concern, but the way that the side facade is handled, as Everardo talked about, I think does that job in an alternate way. by retaining the visual expression, which will be visible to the public, even if only the architectural nerds among us who would spend the time to look into that crevice. The fact that the rear volume is retained as a facade expression and highlighted in a composition, for me, makes it acceptable. I think that it's interesting. If you look at the block, the rear yard addition, there are 3 other rear yard additions that go the full length. 2 of them belong to Bard. So it's a bit, self-fulfilling prophecy that the block has full depth additions. That's another thing that we generally don't do on townhouses. When you see a townhouse that wants to do modifications to its rear yard, we almost always require a buffer along the back so the plantings can grow there. But again, because the block is not pristine in that regard, and because of the specific needs of community facilities, I think that that's appropriate. And I mean, the overwhelming kind of tenor of the testimony, having focused on things that are not within our purview, I mean, that the first thing I think of is West Sider, Paul Simon's lyric, one man's ceiling is another man's floor. We're all living tight here, and that's kind of the nature of it. And our job as a commission, as I see it, is not to stop development, to stop change, but to make it reasonable and to make it work within the aesthetic guidelines that will allow for the history of the district to be continually enjoyed by the public. And I think that from that token, if not from the token of light and air, if not from the token of acoustics or blocking people's windows, I think this project meets it and does it in a very, very capable way.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Chen.
Something that I think is important is, and I don't know if you finished your thought there, because I know where you're going, is the approach strategy in this en massing is to make separate volumes, which I think helps it a lot. It doesn't feel like you're glomming onto the existing mass. It's separated. And I think that's what you were saying. Yeah. The existing light well divides the 2 volumes. It was infilled, but it was respected and kept so that the addition, which goes in front of the rear of the top floor, which we typically enforce to remain, is now the whole volume as the new, and the front volume is seen as the historic. And I think that was very clever. But it also creates a means for a contemporary language to have dialogue with the historic in a very nice way that seems to fit together.
So great rules like that are made to be broken.
Yeah.
Right.
Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, interesting discussion, and I think the commissioners really, really thoroughly explored this case. And couple sentiments quite clear. Obviously, we sympathize with the neighbor, but unfortunately, those are not in our purview. And as Commissioner Goldblum said correctly, historically, not just in this agency in terms of land use, when you're dealing with community facility, it is treated in a separate way. And I think that Vice Chair Bland said it very well, which is that, in the context of the city and the pattern, this is quite well handled by a very, very capable team. And having said that, and I think that the green roof, for example, that is a really, really nice, and not just because of landmark, but also the climate change, the need to retain water on rooftop, like the Dallas code will require you to do that, but in this city, not yet. But overall, I can support it. I think that a couple comments in terms of Commissioner Chu's comment about the door height, I'll leave that to the staff on the front door. I did notice that in terms of the prior historic proportion, if the staff want to adjust the proportion that I like the fact that you're putting the balustrade back on the rooftop on the front facade. I think that's helped to restore the front, and I think that is a something that, as Commissioner Diana Chapin said, if the staff want to study it, that's also. With that, I apologize. I cannot stay to vote, but I'm in support of it.
Thank you very much.
Say one more thing.
Yes.
You know, I kept thinking this and I didn't say it, but we all know it. These tiny gem of buildings, you know, that are sandwiched really in the landscape, sandwiched between two larger buildings. They kind of dot the landscape of the city. Whenever I see them, I'm always like very excited, you know, that they have a life within a city that is constantly changing. And I feel like they are, you know, they are part of the story of our city, and they're a connector between our past, our present, and our future. And I truly appreciate that. And I think what's going on here, you know, is exemplifies that and adds to it in a wonderful way. And I just wanted to point that out too.
Okay. Great. Thank you. I thank you all for your very thoughtful comments. And so I think where we are is we have a consensus to approve today. Should they wish to continue to study the color, you know, any change to that would be more restorative would be eligible for a staff level approval. So that's something you can choose to do. But I think otherwise we can do a straight approval today.
In the matter of number 8, West 86th Street in the Upper West Side Central Park Historic District. This is an application to construct rear yard and rooftop additions and alter the main entrance and areaway. I note that the building scale, style, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Upper West Side Central Park West Historic District. I further note that the building is now part of the campus of the Bard Graduate Center, which includes 3 other buildings on the block, which have been enlarged by the same design architect pursuant to Landmark Preservation Commission approvals in the past. I recommend approval, noting that the work will not eliminate or damage any significant architectural features, that lowering the primary entrance to grade by cutting the masonry steps and lowering the interior floor plate and finishing the masonry to form a base for the columns will provide barrier-free access to the building in the least intrusive manner possible. That the new wood entrance doors and decorative elements will approximate the historic features while being carefully adjusted in terms of proportion to fit the enlarged opening. That modifying the western window opening into a door and installing a platform over a portion of the areaway will remove only a minimal amount of historic fabric, and the proposed door featuring divided lights that approximate the historic window configuration will maintain a sense of symmetry to the ground floor. That the proposed black finish for the ironwork and white finish for the windows will relate well to the age and style of the building. That the building is not part of a row, and much larger apartment buildings have been constructed on either side. Therefore, the proposed work will not overwhelm or meaningfully alter its historic relationship to the streetscape. That the proposed new construction will maintain the historic separation between the design front portion of the original house, which is to remain, and the rear portion of the house separated by an air shaft and clad in plain masonry, which is to be replaced by the proposed additions, helping to mediate the change in scale from the original house to the additions. That the proposed additions will be moderately visible through a narrow alleyway from one view corridor across West 86th Street, and from the rooftop addition will be set back substantially from the front facade and only minimally visible from directly across the street through the reconstructed historic balustrade. That only a portion of the additions will be minimally visible through a narrow gap view across the block and will be seen in context of a sidewall and large apartment buildings. That the contemporary design and materials of the additions, featuring layers of red brick, terracotta, and gray zinc rain screens, will harmonize with the building and its surroundings. That the construction of the lower levels of the full lot rear addition will not significantly impact the central green space due to its location at the end of the row and adjacency to the larger apartment buildings. That the proposed excavation at the rear yard will be done in compliance with the Department of Buildings regulations under the supervision of a licensed professional engineer to protect the building and adjacent buildings, and that the work will facilitate the adaptive reuse of the building from residential to museum educational facility, and that the work will not detract from the special architectural or historic character of the Upper West Side Central Park Historic District.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
She said
She
second.
seconded it.
Yeah,
Okay.
second.
Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye, sorry.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Master.
Aye.
With 8 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
All right. That's approved. Thank you very much. Good luck. All right. So that concludes our public hearing today. We will see everybody next Tuesday, which is the 24th.